Hello and welcome to the Legends of Tabletop podcast, where the Eagles are going to the Super Bowl, and this won't be relevant whenever this comes out. We are doing Runners Reboot Part 2. Um, Kevin, I'm going to need you to lock the door. So, Jesse, this is really an intervention. We need to talk about your feelings about where you are with runners and how this is affecting you, and see kind of where we can, sort of get these things worked out to where we can get a finished product.
Yeah, it's pretty much all I think about. I'm kind of obsessed right now. It's really eating at my brain.
So we had a plan coming in tonight. Tonight is going to be sort of where the system is, where the playtest is, all that kind of stuff.
Where it's going.
Where it's going. It was going in one direction, and that doesn't seem like that's going to happen. So I'm going to just kind of kick it over to Jesse and kind of get a sense of where things are, where you feel about stuff, and kind of what we're doing.
Yeah. So history of the development. We'll do a short, concise history of where things had gone so far, where they are now, and then where they possibly will go in the future. So as all of you probably know, or if you've watched any of it, Runners is based on Core. The system that Todd developed, using day trippers, splintered it off. It's the system that a lot of us in Legends have kind of grown our narrative feathers on. And we all were pretty traditional D&D players up until starting Core. It's really what introduced us to more narrative gameplay. And so that's what, I decided to base Runners off of. In using the system for such a long time at this point, in GMing it, and you'll probably have noticed if you're listening to the actual play, I've homebrewed or begin to twist a lot of it to suit my needs. And where I kind of want to be as a GM and as a player right now. So I've gotten rid of the list of skills and instead put in traits. I've opened them up to be a lot more narrative, a lot more free flowing. They're not associated with, with abilities now. You can kind of use them whenever you want. In addition to that, what hadn't been tested out yet that we were going to start in the next season was the new leveling mechanic. Getting away from the large scale kind of 100 point, 150 point buy-in of character creation, lowering it down to just a handful of points, and then making leveling, gaining XP, not just a result of the dice. Previously, it was you get an XP for yes and, for a no but, for overcoming ops, that kind of more traditional stuff. And instead pulling drivers into leveling. So I pulled this idea a little bit from games like Mouse Guard and from Blades in the Dark, where you gain XP whenever you use your ability. So I was going to go towards a system like that. Then after researching, here's where the twist comes in now. After researching, I kind of decided that Core might not be the right system for runners.
Gasp.
Oh, so Core is not great at handling combat, at least not on the scale that we normally do it with. When you have 3 players and 2 or 3 NPCs There's a lot of rolling. There's a lot of stuff that the GM has to control, has to not control, has to keep track of, right? You know, what did people roll? What are their bonuses? Do they have armor? Is there, you know, there's a bunch of stuff that isn't just compare one number to a next. And, you know, it's not like D&D where it's like, okay, I roll, here's a 19. What's their AC? Oh, it's 18. Okay, I hit. There's a lot of little things, and numbers constantly change, right? Because HP, there's no HP. So they hit agility. Okay, now my agility is a 3 instead of a 4. Okay, that means I have to do this. And so there's a lot to keep track of. And I didn't want to have to keep track of stuff to that extent. So I, about a month and a half ago or so, give or take, decided that I was going to move runners away from core, and I started system researching. I had first looked at a handful of Gila RPG, or Gila publishing, in specific the Lumen system. When looking at that, though, it was a little too, not necessarily one-shotty, but it wasn't meant for long-term campaigns, which is what we normally play. And it was a little too arcadey for my taste, which isn't a slam. It's literally what the system was meant to do. It was meant to be more of a like Dark Souls-ish representation. Another system I was looking at, which I ultimately kind of settled on, was Blades in the Dark. I really like the resolution mechanic. I like the fact that the GM doesn't have to roll. It still takes the pool of D6, so it's kind of tangentially related to core. You know, and I liked how narrative heavy it was in its focus. Up until this morning.
You're welcome.
Yep, I've been playing around with Blades for about 2 or so weeks now, maybe 3 weeks, trying to get runners to fit into the system. And it just wasn't happening. There were some things that worked really well. You know, taking the playbooks fit really well into the specializations. I like the idea. I know John's hesitant, but I really like the idea of the crews, you know, kind of you building your squad, as we called it, together. It gave me a really cool idea. They have layers that you can upgrade and advance, and I really like the idea of like runners having a garage, you know, like a workplace that they could base themselves out of.
That was cool. I did like that part.
Yes, yeah. The clocks are an interesting idea. I liked that had that similar play cycle that core does. You know, they specifically call it out as a, you know, you have free play, you have planning where you get your job, you have the score itself, and then you have downtime. And then it kind of cycles on through. And I feel like that really works well with our play style as well.
Well, and it's core adjacent too, right? Like specifically like with
exactly,
the downtime actions where it gives you narrative time to explain your XP expenditures, to make plans, to you know, feel out the characters and have some of those character moments that you know, like a trad game like D&D doesn't doesn't intrinsically call out downtime or rest, right? Like, yeah, you go back to the inn, you sleep, you take a long rest, you do whatever, but it's not specifically about like investing in the character per se.
Right, yeah. And I do like how, you know, Blades in a sense mechanizes downtime, right? So like it gives you things to do, right? So it like gives you downtime activities, and then the cycle starts over and you go back into the free play where you're kind of exploring the world, exploring a character, and then it goes kind of back in through the whole cycle. But there were, at the end of the day, a lot of things that I just kind of couldn't make fit.
Vices was rough.
Yeah, Vices really doesn't necessarily fit the game, right? Like Runners, it's a great thing. Stress is iffy for me. In some senses it really makes sense in the moment, but to do flashback stress, I understand that stress is like the
HP essentially.
Kind of, yeah. It's what's the word I'm looking for?
Resource management.
Resource. It's the resource that they use.
Yeah.
But I didn't want multiple, because I'm really like, the whole point of this kind of, you can't necessarily tell by our actual plays, but is running, right? So like we already have the stress of like power and things like that, and I don't want multiple resources for you guys to have to deal with. And then kind of the kicker for me was John reading all his comments on the doc that I had thrown together, trying to mash runners into blades. And that's when I kind of came to the decision that runners needs its own system. There's really nothing out there that I know of that fits runners.
Yeah. Now, Kevin, did you have an opportunity to look at any of the initial blade stuff, the SRD or any of the other stuff, and like to kind of prep for system changing?
So I don't think I've never played blades before, and I looked at it a little bit, but to be honest, I was going into it, and maybe this is unfair. I'm like, okay, when we get closer to it, I'll dig more into it, because that's just the way I do. And going into it super fresh, I thought would have been fun also. Not that I was going to be a drag on us. When we're playing, I didn't want to be the guy that was asking questions every couple seconds. Oh, I forget how to do that. I don't know how to do that. But it was more like, you know what? Let's go in as a complete, because it is a completely new thing. Let's see if I can work that into the character. So if you're saying there's a lot of sunk cost, there's not. Don't worry about it, right? It's not like, and it's if there's books around, right, I read them. I've probably read more books than I've ever played. So part of that is why we do all this, because we enjoy, we enjoy reading the stuff and a scenario or campaign or something, just to read it because it sounds interesting, and maybe picking bits and pieces out or ideas. But yeah, so it's not like, even if I had sat down and read it cover to cover 3 times, it's not like it would have been like, oh crap, now we're doing something different. It's just part of the journey kind of thing, and it's what we do anyway. So
that's one of the reasons why I actually why I was interested in blades in the first place, is because with core, right, it's you roll a number of d6 equal to your ability score, right? And in blades, it's pretty much the same thing, except more subdivided. So you had 3 abilities, and then you have 4 skills for each ability, right? Actions, whatever.
I hated that.
I did too.
What the fuck does this even mean? It's like you're just doing shit. What the hell's an action?
So so you had 4 skills for each ability, and that is the number that you use. So like under like I can't remember what is it. I can't remember if it's agility or not, but let's say it's agility. So under like agility, you would have like prowl, right? Or prowess. That's right. Under prowess, you would have prowl. And if your prowl is rank 3, then you roll anytime you try to stealth or sneak or do anything using prowl, you roll 3 dice.
Which was also weird, the way that they described it, because it was like you choose your action points or whatever, and it's like, no, you don't. You choose your skill / action,
Right.
And
Yeah.
that has a die thing. So you're not like, well, I'm going to roll 3 and I'm going to use this skill. It's like, no, you're going to use this skill and it has dice associated with it. Like, what the?
Right.
This
Yeah.
doesn't even make any sense. Like, this is horrible writing.
Well, the tricky thing
it's
too
an editor
is that they're
thing, right? How many times have we
Exactly.
read
Yep.
something and you can see someone has an idea in their mind and they think it fits in or it's clever or whatever, but no one's edited it or taken or like a copy editor saying, okay, that doesn't make sense, or the copy editor doesn't play, so they're like, okay, well, this guy said this is what you do. There's no punctuation mistakes or whatever, so that makes sense. But that's why people play test, right? Because then you're like, okay, that phrasing doesn't, it's confusing or it doesn't flow or things like that.
Yeah.
So.
And it was tough too because there are certain times, I don't know why you would ever do it, because you have 12 skills to choose from, where they're like, well, sometimes you don't use a skill, you'll use the ability. And in that case, you like add up the number of skills that you have a point in. So, and that's how many die you roll. And it's interesting, but
that seems like it's just trying to build narrative, right? And for something like that, okay, so you take something and underneath that you can do all these different things and it's mapped out or it's in the rules, where if you're comfortable creating your own character or spinning something out or creating a backstory or actions or whatever, you can build that yourself. Just take the main thing and branch it off from there. And I think those are prompts to help people. It's good for character generation, right? If you're like, okay, I'm kind of stuck, I can't think of what to do, but having that bolted in as part of it, it's trying to flesh stuff out. You run into a problem where we always said, okay, a combat, okay, this is the number you have to hit, I hit it, okay, this is the damage. There isn't that narrative or the stuff around it, and breaking that down to all those subsets kind of is the system trying to force people who don't necessarily can come up with something flowery to then force them to do that or help them do that.
Right. Yeah. And I mean,
sometimes it can be a lag, right? It's a drag if you're just trying to hit check boxes.
Yep. And I mean, I did appreciate, like, here, I'll bring them. I should get my book, because I actually bought, like, I like the system enough that I actually bought the Blades in the Dark book. It also helped that they were having a crazy sale when I did it. But
well, and some of the stuff too, they were like, if you can't decide on an action or like something doesn't apply, like just roll dice. And that's the kind of thing that Todd would do, like in decision making. And you do the same thing sometimes. Just in making a decision, does the guard turn left? Does he turn right? You just roll dice to, just kind of determine an outcome. Yeah.
Right.
Which is fine, right? Like, it's not something everybody's necessarily accustomed to, right?
Right. I should pull up. I actually accidentally pulled up the Scum and Villainy, which also sounds like a very cool. It's a Blades in the Dark, Star Wars basically version. Same thing though, right?
From
like
the title, you can intuit that it's Star Wars.
You're just space criminals instead of fantasy criminals. But so the thing I like is in Blades, so their skills, their actions, right, aren't like your normal like stealth or fighting or like martial arts or insight, stuff like that. It's command, consort, finesse, hunt, prowl, skirmish, study. So they are, like you were saying, Kevin, like they're very narrative pushing.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not like, oh, I use my stealth to, it's like, no, they even suggest that when you say that what you're doing, you use the action name to tell. So like, I'm going to prowl around. Yeah. Yep. So, but in the end, it just wasn't sitting. It just wasn't sitting in the hole good enough for me. So that's why we're gonna just homebrew it. We're just gonna come up. We're going off of a lot of different resources. So obviously, core is where Runners is born. And so, and if anyone doesn't know, Blades was actually born out of Apocalypse World.
Mm-hmm.
So John Harper had was playing Apocalypse World, and he had then created a fantasy version called Dungeon World. And then when he was starting to create what would eventually become Blades, it started off as an Apocalypse World hack. But at a point got so far away from what Apocalypse World was that it became its own system. And I think that's where Runners is now. Right? It was birthed in core, but at this point the mechanics, the content within it has gone so far away from what core is that it's no longer core. And so that's kind of where it is now. Yeah.
Is it difficult to sort of conceptualize where it's going, just because we tend to ignore the systems that we play and just kind of play in a narrative space, and then just kind of engage with mechanics where we see fit, right? Like for us specifically, right?
Yeah. Well, because it tells me what's important. You engage with the mechanics that need to be engaged with. Yeah. And if you're not engaging with them, it means they're not important.
Right.
Basically. Case in point, when we were still like hardcore into core, the what the hell would they called? What are they called in core? What I turned into drivers.
Oh, the Life Shapers.
Life Shapers. Never used them. Right? Never used them. Yeah. Which tells me they're just not a mechanic that necessarily matters to the system. And so it also, in doing this rethink, one of the big changes that I'm going to be doing is with signal burn, with the signal. It's one of those things where it's basically a yes or a no, right? Like you guys look at it, you're like, do we have enough protection? And 9 times out of 10 the answer is yes. And you're like, okay, cool. And then we forget about it because it's pointless, right?
It doesn't matter at that point. Yeah,
it doesn't matter anymore. So why bother doing it? If the majority of the time players aren't even going to have to worry about it because they have enough protection from it, don't include it. So I'm getting rid of it.
Well, but they might not though, right? Like I think when in the first season, when it was still radiation damage, both Smokey and Zuchi took damage from that because they didn't have enough shielding, right? So like
they took a little bit. Yeah,
but if you start at level 0, depending on how you build your suit, you may not. I don't know why you wouldn't want that to be the highest thing, so you don't get taken over by the by the AI. But like some people,
but it's also
be like I want to be fast. Fuck, right? I don't care. Like I'm just gonna. Well, I'll outrun the signal.
Right. Well, but it's one of those things where it case like you said. Like, as you start off, it might be something that you're worried about, but it's going to probably eventually become, like, if you are, just like what you guys did, right? Your first couple of runs, you took radiation damage or signal damage, right? You took signal burn. What's the very first thing you did?
Better filters, better plating.
You upgraded your protection to the point where it didn't matter anymore. So
in the areas that we were in, right, narratively, you could have been like we went through the mall area. but instead of going through it, we went under it. So we made a narrative choice to limit our exposure by going through a different access because you provided it, right? Or we made the awareness check to see like, oh shit, there's another way we could get through here.
Right.
Or if you fail the check, then maybe you have to go through it, and then you're necessarily going to take some burn, right? Like, it really, like, you could make it anything you want as the GM. Be like, oh, this area is like super high, like fuck you guys.
Well, but that's also not what I want to have, right? I don't believe in the like me controlling the dial, right?
Right.
I don't want to be like, oh, well, what's their highest protection? Oh, they're at 5. Well, fuck it. All the areas around here are 7s. Like they have to take damage now. Like that's just shitty.
For sure.
So, yeah. And it's, so I didn't want a mechanic where you would eventually like buy your way out of it. To the point where it didn't matter. So instead, I'm turning it into ping. It's not you gaining damage from it, but it's you gaining attention instead.
Right.
Things
like heat in blades.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Like heat in blades. What were you gonna say, Kev?
No, I said that makes sense. If the setting and all that, we're not worried about taking damage, we're worrying about being spotted or being tracked or,
right.
So that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And that's not something that you can eventually level your way out of, where you won't have to worry about it anymore. Right? Like you just straight up doing things in the gap is going to gain attention. You can minimize it and mitigate it, but it's gonna build. So that's kind of one of the things that one of the changes. And that's when, I'm really glad that I read through Blades, that I went through this process, because it gave me a lot of really good ideas. But also I like that, I've been struggling with this, and even I did before this whole thing, a few months ago when I was going through it, I was debating whether or not to just make its own system. And one of the reasons I didn't was kind of selfish, right? It was, if I eventually, well, all right, I should say when, when this eventually gets published, when it's released, right? What's going to gain more attention? A homebrew system from some dude who's never done it before, or a Blades in the Dark hack?
Right.
And I went Blades in the, because like, oh, well, if I just do, no one's going to get anything from Joe Schmo. But if it has Blades attached to it, it might stand a chance. Now I'm kind of over that now. So.
Well, and doing the thing has its own merit, right? Like, if 2 people download it, it's, 2 people that download it, right? You still did the thing. Exactly,
yeah. Even if the 2 people are the 2 of you. Maybe Kurt too, who knows?
Yeah.
Who am I kidding? I'll give you guys free copies. But yeah, so that's where it's at right now. It's, where as of 10 hours ago, Runners officially became its own system. And so, yeah, where it's going to go is kind of part of what this is going to be. So I have some ideas, and I was hoping that you guys could help me work through those, at least get the ball rolling, and kind of figure out what this is going to be. Which means, hey, our playtest now is actually going to be a real playtest. We might just be fucking figuring shit out as we go at this point.
Yeah. Well,
so that's not surprising, right? And I guarantee you the vast majority of new systems that people create is because of stuff they've homebrewed, and they're like, okay, well, let's just do it this way. This makes more sense. And if you get a group that's played a long time, or you pick out those things. Well, I'm gonna ignore that role because that's a bit annoying. Or we're a group that we play narratively a lot more. Let's lean on that. Or we all like we're really crunchy. Let's lean on that. So it's not. It makes sense to do that, and vast majority of stuff created that way is because people create their own thing in the way they play, or groups just they know how the characters the best way to get something out of the players, but we'll play to those strengths because that's just the way they like to do it, or they're good at it. So it makes sense to do something like that.
All right. Yeah.
Well,
I'm glad you're on board.
Of course.
I mean, core scratches the itch, right? For the play style that we have. Yeah. And like you said, where it bogs down is if you have a larger combat, right? Because everybody's rolling one time, but your mods go both ways, and it's a lot of bookkeeping, it's a lot of stuff to keep track of, and you're doing that every single round. So like every round you're writing down a bunch of numbers, you're comparing a bunch of things, and what are your mods this time? Did you move out of cover, not in cover? Right. But the system of it insofar as like, yes and yes, but no and no, but, I don't know what the system is. I listen to too many games. But there is something, it might even be Fist maybe, which is like a weird, like sci-fi thing where you're like, your dudes, our PPR's played it a bunch. They're fighters and they go and they land and like they get killed and they get like respawned and shit. It's almost like I don't want to say it's not video gamey, I guess, but I think they have a mechanic that's similar. And again, probably a bunch of other stuff where you roll 3d6 and it gives you that scale, kind of like what you have in Salvage Union, right? So like, 1's a crit fail, and then, 2 to 5 is a fail, and then, 6 to 10 is a, success with consequences. It has that sort of scaling.
Yeah.
So I like something like that works.
Yeah. Powered by the Apocalypse does something, is similar to that, except you're rolling 2d10, I believe, in that system.
Yeah, you could do it a couple different ways. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's so I'm looking, after playing systems like, looking at Blades, after playing Salvage Union, stuff like that, I really like that one-sided scale, right? But at the same time, I do really still like Core's resolution of... So I want that sliding factor still. Where... And in talking too, one of the things that we didn't like about Salvage Union was the fact that there was no modifier.
Right. And a single D20. Like, it's great.
You roll.
Go ahead.
So Kevin, if you're not initiated with Salvage Union, the only rolling mechanic that there is a single D20 unmodified. And it is 1 is a fail, is a crit fail. 2 to 5 is a consequence. 6 to 10 is a success with a consequence.
Yes.
11 to 19 is a success, and then 20 is a critical success. But the problem is, like, all what you do doesn't. There's nothing you can do necessarily to change that, to alter it. It's literally all you do is like, I roll the die, and that's it. You have, like, John did have an ability where he could spend energy points or whatever they called it, EP,
ability
right? Or
point,
AP,
ability points for the sniper.
Ability points. Yeah, and he just automatically hit. And it's like,
you only get so many points.
Yeah, exactly. You get like what,
spend them.
5 points or something.
Well, to start, it might be like 3. At third level, we had 6.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wasn't a big and with blades, it's the same way. Except, similar to core, you are increasing your chances by favoring actions that you have more points in, right? So it's still that 1 to 3 is a fail, 4 to 5 is a success with a consequence, 6 is a success. And then if you roll multiple 6s, then it's a critical success. So obviously you want to roll dice with more, you want to do actions with more dice because you have a better chance at getting higher numbers. Yeah. What I was thinking of, and I don't know if it will work,
I hate it,
but I want to give it a shot, is similar to Blade. It's kind of hybriding blades and core. So I want to figure out if there's a way to keep the multiple D6, right? So take core, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have agility 3. I want to cut someone with my knife, right? I roll 3d6 and I have a +1 in martial arts, right? So that means I'm rolling 3d6 with a +1. My idea, if it will work, I don't know, is to take the core 1 through 10, right? And make it so that your base is a 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
Take mid scale. 5 is a yes, and you're going to roll your dice. You're going to add it up. You're going to add any bonuses, and a 5 is a yes. Plus a 1 over 5, 1 over your target number is a yes, and same, very similar to what we do now in core. Where the adjustment will be is in whatever you're fighting or attempting to overcome. So if you're going up against a runner that has armor, right? If they have armor +2, well, now to hit them isn't a 5 anymore, it's a 7.
Mm-hmm.
If they have an ability where if they're quicker, right? Then, say they also have martial arts +1, right? Well, now instead of 5, it's a 6. Mm-hmm. If they have armor on top of that, now it's an 8. So we're still dealing with that moving target number. It's just not, it's more of like, what did you get? Here's what I got. Then we resolve it similar to core towards blades or salvage union, mm-hmm. where we're still taking that 1 over, 2 over, hit, 1 under, 2 under, but that scale is moving up and down that 1 to 10.
It's almost like a fate thing too, with a +1 over.
Right. Yeah.
Under thing with the plus minus stuff. So is it still the single highest die, or are we talking about adding the dice pool together?
No, still the single highest.
Gotcha. It does make the accounting easier in that sense, right? Because then it's just like a roll to hit, like any other system. Then,
right, and I don't have to. That way, the GM doesn't have to take into account, what was rolled versus what the end bonus is.
Mm-hmm.
There's no tracking your armor or anything like that, because that doesn't necessarily get taken into account. So that kind of stuff will be a lot easier on the GM side. Yeah. And I feel like, I don't know, I don't know if this is how it will ultimately work out, but I still feel like that number even though it won't be quite as random, right? It's still going to be swingy enough that it should still be entertaining.
So it's almost not really, but almost like Aliens or something, where or even Blades, where your 6 is like the succeed, right? Or is that kind of where it's going? Where I know you said 5,
well,
but
it will be that, as if completely unmodified, yes. So if it's completely unmodified, then yeah, like, except it'll be 5 will be your success, and a 6 will be a critical success. Yes will be, or your yes and, right? But that number, it won't be that all the time. Yeah. Right? That number is going to go higher or lower. If they have a condition against them, like, I really still do like the tags and the effects. So, if they have an effect against them where they are prone or anything like that, well, then hitting them is going to be easier. So that 5 is now going to become a 4. So that number is going to kind of go up and down from round to round.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, obviously we have to try it to see if it works, right? Like almost like it almost gives me like feelings of like Deadlands, where like your target number is a 4, right? Like your base is 4 and it goes up and down from there.
Kind of, yeah.
Right, and 4 would be sort of the mid scale on a D6, right? 3.5, so 4.
Right, yeah.
Would kind of give you that.
The reason I chose 5 off the top of my head when doing this was purely because the core scale is 1 to 10. If we could absolutely fuck around with it, and one of the things is it could be maybe like a 1 to 12 scale, and your medium is a 6. Right. Because in theory, in core, and more than likely in runners, you can get up to 6 in a skill, right? So in theory,
it costs you a lot.
it would take a long time. But in theory, you could get all the way up to a 6 in a skill, which means your max is a 12.
Yeah.
So it could become a 1 to 12 scale if we want to kind of do that. So we'll see. But that's kind of the going idea right now.
And then essentially everything else stays the same?
Yes and no. More or less, honestly. Well, the same as in version 11, which is the version we haven't actually played yet.
And then we all skipped because you might have systems.
Read. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the version that you might have read, but we haven't actually. It's the version that we were going to start playing this season. Before all this, and apparently it is the system we will be playing. So
yeah. All right. I thought you might be going more along the lines of like, a 3D6 system, roll at them together and then, go for a scale, kind of like with Salvage Union, right? Where you have that succeed at a cost, or succeed with, or just plain succeed versus fail, just straight fail. Or
I thought about that, but at the same time, I like the modification of the roll.
I think you could still have modification though, right? Like positional advantage, tactical advantage, intel bonus, any of those sorts of things, give you +1, give you.
Well, yeah, but it would be, I like for me, the traits, not the training aspect of runners. So you have your 6 skills or your 6 abilities, and then we had your more narrative, let's call them skills, because that's what everyone knows, like the colloquial terms, right? You have your 6 abilities, and then you have your skills. And I liked how letting you guys come up with your own skills fed into who the character was. And I don't necessarily want to take that away.
I enjoy that, right? Because it's like, you know, with Blades, you got 3 abilities, 4 skills / actions, and that's it. Same thing with Aliens. You've got, you know, 4 stats.
And you have it's really similar to Aliens in that respect.
Yeah, right. But then it's like,
each,
but I want to do this, and it doesn't sound like any of these things. So, like, I guess it's heavy machinery. Like that, it doesn't feel not appropriate. It feels shitty, right? Like
you feel boxed in.
You feel boxed in from it, and like you said, to be able to pick a skill or a tag that, you know, melds with the character concept or the idea of, or, you know, how the character is developing within the narrative of the story is so much more appealing and satisfying to be like, oh, it makes sense that, you know, this guy would have this, as opposed to like, oh, well, I have these 3 things ever and I can never change. Right? Like in Call of Cthulhu, like you only improve skills if you fail. You know, if you succeed at a skill and then you roll and you fail it, and then you can add a bonus. So like with Harry, we've been through, I don't know, 10 adventures, like a million sessions, and his occult skill is 5. And there's no way to make it any better unless I roll 1 through 5 on a D100. And then maybe I can add up to 10 points to that. Right? And it's like, it doesn't make any sense in the narrative, right? Like, it's just, you should be able to just like take points in that, you know?
Yeah. No, so that's why. So with the new leveling system too, like I said, I borrowed little from Mouse Guard, little from Blades. And it's going to make drivers matter now. So you're going to be able to use it twice in a game, twice per session. You'll be able to use your edge once and your snag once. And at any point during the game, you're going to be able to call on one of those. It's going to add, I believe, what I have right now, or kind of the idea in my head, at least, if this isn't what's written in, this is what it's going to be. You're going to be able to add an extra D6 to that roll, right? And at that point, too, you're going to be able to mark either that skill or the ability that skill, or the ability you used. So one or the other, right? You're going to be able to mark one of those with a check, right? You're going to be able to mark one of those, either the ability or the skill. And then at the end of a session, you're going to look through, and one of the things I can't decide on is if I just want to make it a static 6 checks, or if I want to make it associated with the current level. The way I have it written right now is, so say I have an ability at a +2, or a skill at a +2, I'll need 3 checks in that. And then if at the end of a session, if it has 3 checks, then boom, you erase those, and that skill now becomes a +3. Same thing with abilities, right? If I have brains 3, and I have, at the end of the session, I have 4 marks in brains, I erase those, and my brains is now 4. You get XP for using the skills and the abilities, right? if you want to do a new skill, right? We roll just straight up ability checks all the time, right? If you don't have a skill that matches what you're trying to do, you just roll ability. At that point, you check the ability, or you can, if you want, do a blank check. And at that point, at the end of the session, you can create a new skill. Because all you need is that one, right? So that's where the system is right now in terms of leveling, like advancement. Where that might, I have run a handful of just super quick tests, and it does mean that advancing goes quicker, right? I think I figured it out that you could bring a skill from 0 to 6 in like 20 sessions or something like that.
Really?
Maybe 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Yeah. And about 20, around 20, 18 to 20, I think it was. Which still, that's only giving one of your drivers every single session to one skill.
Yeah.
Right.
Fair. Yeah.
Which means you're negating
Everything
pretty
else.
much everything else.
Yeah.
Right. You still have that one other skill point every session. Right. So you'll effectively get 2 skill points each, or 2 points each session. I'm debating making that more. So one of the things that Blades does in terms of XP is that you get like an XP tag for your playbook for your class. And if you and the GM feel like you've accomplished that during the session, then you'll get an additional point of XP.
Alien says that too.
I don't necessarily. Oh, do they? Yeah.
At the end of the session, did you do this? Did you do that? I forget what the list is, but there's like five questions or something like that. You can.
Yeah.
The GM's supposed to ask at the end of the session, and then you can check them off and see if you.
All right.
Get the extra XP. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I might do something like that as well. Yes.
So
you in the corner.
If you're concerned about every session, maybe they get that extra skill point only at downtime, right? So like if a mission lasts like, the way we play 40 sessions, but if your mission takes 2 or 3 sessions, it's not until you get back and have that downtime where again, narratively, this is you doing a thing that necessitates you incorporating this new skill, right? You're seeing
that's a good point.
The player use it, or they're going to do it during downtime. Well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to plink some cans and I'm going to add firearms because, I spend some time doing some target practice and, fucking learn how to clean a gun or whatever.
Yeah, that's a good point. So Blades actually has something similar where you can train in downtime.
Yeah.
So that might make sense as well. So.
Because then it holds back that you're just gonna get stuff every time you play, and then all of a sudden your characters are unstoppable because they've got 4s and 5s and everything, and they're working on getting that their last skill up to 6.
Yeah, and I mean even I'm not super worried because go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say having it that way then also helps you feed into the actual role playing, right? It's okay. If we play 5 times, after the 5th time, I know I'll be able to do that. Having a hook in there to be able to, have you fed into your trait? Did you do this action? Did you like in Aliens? It was, these specific things. John was a doctor, right? Did he help save someone, or that kind of thing? You may have a session where you get a whole bunch of stuff, or a session you don't because your character wasn't doing what your character should have been doing,
Right. Yeah.
So having that kind of prompt, or that cudgel is the wrong way to say it, but that that prompt to do what your character's supposed to be doing to earn those things, right?
Right. Yeah.
I'm a gunslinger, but I haven't shot anybody. There's no reason for you to then be a better gunslinger if you haven't
Yeah.
shot
Right.
anybody.
Yeah.
And yeah, for me too, it also standardizes the XP, the advancement. There were times, I mean, look at some of our day tripper games, right? Where by just the way things were going, Trey would end a session because I did a bunch of hacking, right? I tried to do a bunch of stuff, and there were a bunch of steps in it, right? So I was rolling a bunch. So I'd walk away with a session with like 7 or 8 XP.
Right.
Meanwhile, well, you guys did some stuff. Most of it was narrative, and you rolled a few times. So you guys walked away with like 2 or 3. Which, is fine, right?
Yeah, it never bothered me, right? Because like it's about the story, right? Like, and at some point,
yes.
like you're good at the things, like you make the character, and you kind of live in the skin, and you sort of have like an idea of where things are going, and then you get decent at the things that your character's supposed to be decent at, and it's like, not that I don't care, but like my shooting's a +2, my fighting's a +2, my whatever, like. I'm pretty okay in most cases, right? Like my max rolls at 8, like I'm fine. If I get 2 XP this session, like I don't care. My stats are already all at 3. I'm rolling 3 dice. Like, what do I care?
Yeah.
Like, I don't need a 4.
Well, and also that's actually too one of the reasons I want to push the scale higher, like up towards the higher regions. Because when we were playing, you get it once you have like a +2 in a skill, unless you're doing insane things, you're gonna yes and all the time. Right?
A lot of the time. Yeah.
A lot of the time. And that it's fun, but after a while, it's also like, oh yeah, I'm rolling a +3 on this. I'm gonna succeed. Right? So that's why I kind of want to, I want to make the lower end of the scale. That's why I want to start it off at like a 5 or a 6, right? And only have it creep up from there. Because I want to make it so that you guys don't feel comfortable at a +2. Right? Like fair. I have a +2. All right, that's great. But we also now just ran into a Reaver that has 2 armor and also can't feel pain. So you're rolling 8s, like you have to hit an 8 just to hit this guy.
Yeah.
or else some bad shit's gonna happen to you. So I want to kind of push that around a lot.
Well, in the majority, like, so the difficulty levels for core 1 to 10, and it seems like, or at least it felt like a lot of times, right? Unless you're in combat, because it's a more fluid thing. Most of your DLs are sitting at 3 and 4, which is challenging and difficult.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Occasionally 5, which is hard. So like you got a pretty tight window of where things are laying within the mechanics / the narrative of the system. So yeah, you get a +2, and like if it's hard, it's a 5. Like I could roll a 5 just on the dice. Like I don't even,
right,
like,
exactly. Yeah. I mean, how many? There were so many. Like Trey was working +3s in a lot of his skills. Right, I was +2, +3, and like I was +3 in 2 of my skills. So we were like, oh, this is going to be hard. You have to beat a 6. I was like, whatever.
Okay.
How's an 8?
Right. And John had what, a +4?
A +4.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So yeah, that's why I really, and honestly, that's even with this discussion, I'm really thinking about pushing that scale all the way up to 12.
Yeah.
Now 12 is going to be insane, right? Like those are your like crazy high, like in runners, right? That's going up against Anne, basically. Right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
if you want to do a program like a hacking check against Anne, then it's going to be a 12.
Yeah.
But it's one of those where I want to take I don't want the GM to just, because also from GMing core, one of the hardest things is trying to be hard but fair, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I think the reason why so many DLs sit in that like 3 to 5 range is because you're like, oh well, I want it to be hard, but I also, I don't want to come off like I'm trying to make them fail, right?
Right.
So that's how I kind of want to take that out of the GM's hands and just like make it more of a straightforward thing. And which is why I want to put it into the enemy's hands, into the actual numbers, instead of the GM just having to pick a number.
Yeah. Well, roll them and add them together. I'll give you that with like a salvage union thing, right? Because it's just like this is the scale on which you roll, right?
Right.
So
Yep.
It does give you that same kind of spread.
Yeah.
And some things
so
like,
yeah.
Well, no, because you wouldn't have. Yeah, because it would just be like a base 3d6, right? Like your skills. Your stats, I guess, wouldn't make any difference at that point then.
Right. That's why I like the idea of a 3d6, add them together. But I also like the advancement aspect and giving you guys the skills to create and the ability to create new skills and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And just going with a base system doesn't allow you to do that.
Well, I mean, if we're creating a
even
system,
with blades, right? Well, even with blades, right? Like you can roll more d6s, right?
Right.
But ultimately, it just gives you
a d6.
Yeah, and ultimately, it just gives you more likelihood to hit a 6, right?
Yeah.
So I want more swinginess than just a static range.
Right. That's fair.
Yeah. But ultimately we'll play with it and see if it actually works. That's the big thing.
Right.
I'm also going to probably standardize specializations. Because I did like the abilities. So this is a blades thing and a salvage union thing. I like the abilities given from that, right? Those are going to let you tweak the mechanics themselves. So I don't quite know how they're going to work yet. But yeah. And I think I'm going to overhaul.
If you have a general idea about what you want to do, like the higher level thoughts, right? We'll find out if they work when we play, right? That's the whole idea.
Right. Yeah.
So don't try to go in and try to make it perfect or the way you think it'll flow. Just have some general ideas. The main point with some bullet points. Okay, if it goes A, then B, then C, and then see what works, see what flows when we try it, and it may slot into exactly how you want it, or you may come up with a better idea to make it. That feels that it maybe makes more sense. So I think that's a problem a lot of people get into where they're almost railroading themselves, right? They're like, okay, this is how I want it to be. This is how it should be. Yeah. And until the rubber meets the road, you're really not going to know. And it's that, that paralysis by analysis, right? I'm going to try to make it perfect on paper,
right.
But until you actually try it, right, you're not going to know.
Yeah.
Players.
I mean, it's like,
right up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's what we're here for, right?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's like creating an adventure, like a campaign, right? Like, if you plan every session out, every beat, moment to moment, from beginning to end, well, your characters are going to fuck that up 15 minutes into the first session.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're going to have to come up with everything new from that point on. So yeah, you bring up a really good point, Kev. I think I might just try to come up with what we're going to use first, right? Come up with the base of the system, come up with what you guys are going to need at the very beginning, and then see what you attach to, see what you don't, and start building on the things that you actually use instead of, coming with the whole cloth system and then like Signal Burn, like coming up with, diving into this whole system only for it to never get used.
Or it's an interesting concept.
Worst comes to worst, pushing you guys into that mechanic and be like, come on, play with this, play with it.
Yeah.
But if there is something that you really like, right? If you're taking that as an example, you're like, okay, this fits into what I want to do. It fits into the overall, what I want to come up with. How many different roles or things have you guys seen in a setting or, a system that you think, wow, that's really cool, but just never happens, right? It's for other people. Maybe some other people will pull it out, right? So you don't take away what, like for the Signal Burn, okay, maybe we didn't use it, but it does narratively fit perfectly with the whole thing. And maybe someone else will set up, maybe they'll set up a run of someone doing it, and that's all they lean on, right? Because that's what they're focused on.
Yeah.
So, leave the cool stuff in there and, prompt us to make sure, because that's one thing I always want to make sure is, okay, I have my character. I'm going to play my character. But if there's stuff you want us to do, make sure we do it to test it. Or we're good at finding ways around stuff. But okay, well, I don't want you to go around this. I want you to actually do it. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
People will pull out those roles or those things that they really like and they lean on, and that could be something that someone else focuses on completely when they're doing a run.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like other than, the fact that Runners has been core up to this point, we've kind of ignored the fact that this is a playtest and just play it like it's an established system.
Yeah.
And I always try to make sure to remind myself about that, right?
Yeah.
We're having fun and we're playing, but I'm like, okay, is there something Jesse mentioned that is new or wants to try, or not trying to shoehorn it in unnaturally, but okay, let's try to do that because that's that's part of the system.
That's kind of it. Ultimately too, it's kind of up to me, right? I mean, like you said, Kevin, like if I have something new that I want you to try out, like as the GM, I should put things in front of you that prompt you to try. I'm obviously not gonna be able to force you to do it, right?
Yeah.
But to prompt you to do it.
Yeah. We could,
I think that's kind of where I was going all through the season 2, right? Is I didn't really have anything that I wanted to try out. I started getting really excited when going into season 3, into this upcoming story, because that's when I had the new stuff. But even then, the only new stuff was the character creation and the advancement. Now I feel like I have a bunch of new stuff that I want to try out.
Yeah. And we could do individual things, right? Like, Caleb just did, release through RPPR, just a playtest of combat mechanics. So like, it's a story and they're playing a game and like things are happening, but like we're like, this is a combat heavy game that we're doing tonight. Like we're going to mash all the buttons, right? So like we could, in theory, be like, okay, well, we need to work out an initiative system, a bartering system, whatever it is, and just play a game. And it wouldn't necessarily have to be with these characters. We could just do like we did, the World of the Weird, what Todd was doing, magic stuff.
Just
like
do some pre-gens or roll up some quick characters.
Right. And we were like, okay, we're going to do like heavy combat tonight. We're going to just do like 3 or 4 encounters, loosely string together a narrative where like, this is why we're doing the thing. And just, play with that for a night. Like that's a valid thing we could do.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm also kind of looking forward to what's going to be happening. Slight spoilers, maybe, if you haven't caught up, or, but you guys are kind of in a shit place right now, right?
It's not great.
It's not great. It's going to get worse. If that's, if you didn't get that hint. And so this is giving both the story, it's going to give the system more of a chance to show off with the new story arc. Because it's kind of starting a lot of things over again. So I feel like we're gonna have more of a chance to do that kind of stuff. It's gonna break the story, at least where the story loop, right? We kind of got into a pattern, and so it's gonna break that, which will hopefully give more of this a chance to get played. I don't want to spoil too, because I can't spoil it necessarily because I don't even necessarily know what's going to happen. but yeah, my hope is that this, and you bring up a really good point too, where I can kind of lean you guys in, which I kind of did at the end of the last session, where I basically drew you into a combat scenario, right? Which is what made me ultimately give up core, is because I was like, oh wow, this is not working. this is chaos.
Yeah.
But I think going back to that and what John was saying, it's almost like bottle episodes, right? Caleb says, okay, we're gonna do combat because we need to work this out. I remember listening to a podcast a long time ago where the two guys were talking about who makes better wizards. And, people always complain that wizards aren't fun in combat and they just had like 2 sessions where it was just a wizard battle. They're like, okay, we're going to do this. And that's
nice.
So if you want to do that, I think we're good at knitting narratives together, right? So if you came to us and said the next 4 episodes are just bottle episodes, this is combat, this is social, this is just a flat out, just a run, that kind of thing. I think we would be good enough, or I think we're comfortable enough to knit that into an overarching, kind of narrative. So if it comes to that, and there are those prompts that you want to get a better understanding on, then just tell us, and I'm sure we'll be able to do that. That kind of thing.
I mean, we might, now that this has almost become like a real play test, right? Like before we were right, because core was core, right? It wasn't so much a play test as just making sure that the system made sense, and so and more so to make sure that the world made sense, right? So like everything fit together. I feel like especially last season, like that worked, right? And so I think if it's okay with you guys, what we might do is we'll still play as normal, but if I ever do run into a snag where I'm like, you know what, I'm not sure about this, I want to stress test this one particular thing, rather than warping the story to get into that aspect. If we just are like, hey, you know what? Let's take a freeze and just run this aspect, right? Like outside of, so like, we'll just pull everything out and be like, okay, we're gonna run obstacles right now, or let's just fucking run like chain, like gauntlet fights to see to like stress test this mechanic. Like, so if we can, like, if you guys are cool with doing that, I think that might be a more direct way, rather than being like, okay, well, next time we get into a fight, I'll see if this works. And then like 5 sessions later, you guys eventually get into a fight.
And I think maybe a good thing from your standpoint, right, is, we always joke around it, but we can bullshit a session or our way out of whatever, right? Because that's so if there are things, so maybe not even delineating it, saying, okay, this episode is a combat, this is a run, this is a whatever. Maybe just see how the narrative is going and just have some points of, okay, I want to try to test these things. And guide it this way or that way, or if there's a law, right? Because if you're kind of stuck for, okay, these guys did not what I expected them to do, what are we going to do next, kind of thing, or where the three of us are looking at each other going, I have no idea, let's just roll dice, high, low, whatever comes out. Maybe take that, and if there are certain things you want to guide it to, maybe if there is that law either in our play or we blew up what you wanted to do, maybe pull out one of those and say, okay, well, we're going to do this then. Someone bashed in the door, now you're fighting, that kind of thing, just to test it out, having a couple on standby in case it gets to that point where we've done everything you've wanted to do, or we didn't do anything you wanted to do. You can try to, pull one of those out and put it into the, into that session.
One thing I might do is, if we end up doing it that way, where we're playing it more in narrative, we might glitch the matrix every once in a while, so to speak. Because if I'm doing playtesting like that, for instance, like the scale, the scope of difficulty, like one of the things I might do is like, okay, well, where I need to test where the happy medium is. And if I'm pushing, and if I'm like, okay, well, let's find out the high end, and it's too high and you guys die because I was testing some shit out, like, we might be like, okay, guys, that didn't work, so it didn't happen. Like, that would be this over. I wouldn't want to be like, it's like, okay, let's see what happens, like, if just if this guy has 3 armor and can do that, like, so, and you guys are like, oh fuck, we can't hit him at all, we're doing like no buts and no ands. And like, this isn't going well, and we're still rolling good.
Well, like I said, we could do separate episodes where we just roll up a couple of characters and play. So what I might do,
so what I think we might do is like a hybrid method, where I might, if I just want to regular test mechanics, then I might put stuff in front of you, kind of steer things one way or the other. But if I want to just hardcore stress test a mechanic, then we might like pull everything out and do that, like, out of, like, in the, what was the training room in Dragon Ball Z? That pure white room.
And I was thinking Symbol Space and Eclipse Phase.
Oh yeah. All right, we might just I might just like pull you guys out and like drop you into a training sim to run some mechanics to see if I'm like hardcore testing something, and I'm like, there's a chance you guys might die because of this, and I don't want you to die in the story. So we'll just make it pretend.
Well, then that would make sense, right? Because the setting is, pretty rough and tumble, right? I think
Yeah.
I don't think this is necessarily true, but I think we stick with characters for quite a while.
Oh yeah.
It's not like, we're playing Cthulhu and we've got 4 characters lined up kind of thing. I don't think we do that. I think we've all played enough that we're not like that attached to a character, right? But it just tends to be the way we play is, there's a lot more narrative around it. If we played a lot more where it was just dice rolls, I think a lot of our characters would have dropped a lot quicker. Right.
Yep.
And I don't think we do that purposely. I think it's just the way we play. And
I mean, it's too, we don't. Yeah, I'll go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say the setting would kind of facilitate the fact that, kind of life is cheap, but also life is cheap, but what you're doing is important. So we better train you up a bit. So that would kind of fit in.
Right. Yeah.
If you're like, okay, this isn't working, let's put you in the holodeck and, that kind of thing.
Right. Let's put you in some VR.
Exactly. That would feel, it wouldn't be a jarring kind of thing, right? It would feel
right. Yeah. That's a good point.
Parcel of the setting.
Yeah. No, and I mean, that's one thing. We're not fragile about our characters, right? Like we're not going to be, oh God, I don't want them to. I mean, we don't want them to die, but we're not going to like run away from a fight, or we're not going to do stuff like that to save them, right? We're still going to put them at risk. If they die, and they died a heroic death, right? But I think it's also why we don't necessarily play systems like DCC and Morkborg. Like we don't play like high death. Like your character has 3 hit points and each enemy does an average of 4 damage. Like we don't play systems like that because we like campaign play, right? And we like campaign play because we like narrative development and characters.
Yeah.
So I want to find that I like that balance of like, yeah, death still. And I think that's also one of the issues I have ultimately with core is that you are really hard to kill, right? I haven't figured out what I want to do with that yet. I do enjoy the harm system to a certain extent in Blades. But that's not how I want to go about it in Runners anymore. So in Blades, Kevin, you have 3 levels of harm. You have 2 slots in level 1, 2 slots in level 2, 1 slot in level 3. You can take at any point 1, 2, or 3 harm, depending on how severe the consequences are of your action. Most of the time, you're going to take level 1 harm. But what happens is the first time you take level 1 harm, you fill in one of those slots. Akin to whatever, if you got punched in the gut, right? Then you have internal bruising or something like that, or a stomach ache, whatever you want to do. Second time you take level 1 harm, you fill in that other slot. The third time you take level 1 harm, well, now 2 of your slots are filled up, so now that becomes level 2.
Yeah.
And little by little, you slowly fill up. But if at any point you have to take level 3 harm and your level 3 harm is full, you're dead. There is like level 4 harm is serious harm. And you're pretty much dead. I don't necessarily want to do that in Runners, but I'm not sure how much I like the fact that you are just so hard to maim in core.
Yeah. And we ignored a lot of stuff too, because there are examples in Day Trippers where it's like, like one of the box examples or whatever, like Susie punches, Mary because they're fighting over a guy or whatever, and like she gets a broken finger or a sprained finger or something,
Yeah.
and it's supposed to carry over, which is not that specific thing prompted me to investigate conditions for Cthulhu, but it does make sense, right? Like if you take one harm, yeah, you can blow that off, right? You got a bruise, an abrasion, you got a cut, something small that isn't going to impede you very much. But you like take 2 agility damage, and you've only got 3. Something happened, and that needs to carry over. Now, whether or not it carries over in a fate sense, or like it lasts for this scene or for the rest of the session, or whatever it is, rest of the encounter or whatever. But like if it's serious, then you need to like, and maybe that's fun or not fun to play, right? Like that's the sticky wicket. Like if my leg gets broken, well, this sucks. What do I do? Sit in the hospital while the rest of the team goes to like investigate the thing?
Yeah.
But it could come from multiple sources because it also depends on what the narrative is. If I punch a guy in the head and then he punches me back, so I take a brains damage, but then if he winds up kicking me in the stomach, well, that's like a health damage. So like they're coming from different places. So you're kind of scuffed up and beat up, sort of like HP being like your endurance or whatever in D&D in that sense, as opposed to like every hit is a cut kind of thing. It's it's your stamina.
Yeah.
So so it depends on what the approach is to the narrative, and like what's fun at the table, right? Because some people will be like, fuck, I don't want to do that, it's stupid. Like what am I supposed to do?
Yeah. And I mean one of the ways that Blades handles it is healing is part of downtime. But I don't like, if somebody is hurt, right, and you have like say 4 downtime activities that you can do, right? I don't necessarily want somebody spending all their downtime for after multiple runs just healing, right?
Yeah.
I'm only recovering. That's the only thing I can do because I took 4 damage in our last run and I can only heal 2 of that now. So I'm still down 2. I better hope that I don't take any damage next run, or else I'm still going to be down. And only thing I can do is recover. And I'm like, that feels like just a repetitive hole that is not fun, because then you're not doing anything else but recovering damage.
But does it make sense within the narrative, right? Like if you fall off a building or whatever, you get into a car accident, or you wouldn't be in a car and run, but but wait, but if you take like a major hit like that, then that makes sense within the narrative, right? Like you're fucked up and you need time to recover, and not like people can't come and see you. It's not like you don't have your computer. It's not like you couldn't do research or do like other things that would still help the crew, the squad, the group, the whatever, where you could be doing things. You're just like, you're not running because your ribs are broken, or
but it's also
whatever
it's for me, it's balancing what makes sense narratively and what's fun, right? And like that's not fun. Like it might make sense, right? I mean, look at your first run, right? You got your head bashed in by a reaver, right? So how fun? So like, how fun would it have been for you if you were like, okay, well, I'm down 4 health. I'm like, I got 4 damage right now. I guess I'm out next run because I just got to sit and recover.
Well, but that's the thing with narrative then, right? So like if you're for core specifically, right? Like it's mechanically supposed to be about a month. Well, I mean, if you had a concussion, had obviously bruising and all the other stuff, and you're down for about a month, like it's like travel in D&D. You're kind of hand waving a lot of that downtime. Like so Blade specifically, you get like 2 actions, but you also have like your free narrative play, right? So like if the 2 actions are to heal, so like in the runner scenarios, if my 2 actions are to heal, so that takes up the majority of my activities. Like I'm resting, I'm healing, I'm checking in at the hospital, whatever. Cool. Me personally, I'm fine with that because you can still do your narrative role play stuff where Huxley's at home, Huxley's following Smokey and Zuchi around because I can't do anything. Like, what are you guys doing? What are you guys doing? Like, I can't. Well, I'm not allowed to. But like, well, if you're gonna like, I'll come and watch, right? Like, for me personally, like that's still a fun role play thing where they, where he can do that, and it makes sense, within the story, right? Like, and again, you're just kind of hand waving it because you're like,
and like you said, it does make sense in the story, but from a gameplay perspective. If I do something similar to Blades where you have like 2 downtown actions, right? And you have like these things to choose from and like, oh, I was really hoping to like gain some intel or gain an asset or fix my suit or do this kind of stuff, but right. I can't do any of those actions because the only thing I can do or the only logical thing to do is to use both my actions on recovery.
And you could eat it too, right?
It makes sense.
You could eat it too, right? Like in the 70s, they fucking shoot up the wide receiver with some friggin' cortisone, get back out there, kid, right. You're good to go.
Yeah.
And you could take that risk and go on a run and be in a negative space where like you're down in agility or you're not getting your full bonus on your shooting because you're still kind of like seeing double or whatever. Like you could do that. The sticky wicket for me is when you mechanize the downtime in that fashion. Like you can do 2 things and then you have free play. Well, your role playing is you potentially gaining intel by like, okay, I can't run because I'm concussed, but I could sit at the bar and talk to people and gather intel.
Yeah.
Like that's just you talking to people, right? So like to say that you can't do that, like it rankle, like I don't like that, right? For me personally, because it doesn't make sense even mechanically to be like, well, you can't talk to people, but that doesn't make sense.
Well, no, but you can't. Yeah, for me, like recovery is like either like you in a hospital, right, getting treatment,
in a room.
Or actually like doing physical therapy, stuff like that, like dedicating the majority of your time. So you might still be able to talk to people and do all that, but it's more like, what are you spending the majority of your time doing?
Yeah. It could cut either way. It bothers me because it limits player agency to be like, well, you can't because you can only choose 2 things. Which
true. I do. Yeah,
I get it, but also like,
Yeah, I think what limiting it makes it so that, and I mean, I don't know if I necessarily agree with limiting it, right? Like it really all depends on how much time. If you guys want to spend a day, like just like tuning up your suits after you get home from a run, and then you immediately grab another mission and head out, then that's what you guys want to do. Yeah. If you want to spend a week upgrading your suit, gaining some intel, getting some contacts, doing this kind of stuff, you should be able to do that. So what I don't want to happen is like if you're, say, a group of 3, right? You're a group of 3 runners and one guy gets super beat up during a run, right? Where he's down like 4 or 5 damage. Nobody else really took much damage. One guy might have taken 1. One guy may have taken 1 or like maybe 1 or 2, maybe 0. Just got really fucking lucky with all his rolls, or maybe sat back and did some sniping. And like then what? Like, do all of you wait around for a month for this person to get healed? Or does that one person risk it? What if that one person doesn't want to risk it? Like,
well, I mean, so
and how do you recover damage? Like, how long does it take?
Well, I mean, so there's guidelines for that in core, right? And in most
yeah, but we're
in
not playing
systems
core
where
anymore, John.
Yeah, it's core adjacent, right? Like you could use that as a framework, right? Like if it's one,
Yeah,
it's a couple days. You got bruised up,
yeah,
you know, whatever. You know, when it gets more severe, then obviously it takes longer. Now that length of time, right? Like you gotta figure out what that is.
I think right now in runners, I have it as one, like, natural healing is like one a day, maybe.
That seems
And
fast.
then it does seem fast. What do I have?
One
right
a day
now? God
seems like a
damn it.
lot because you're usually not taking more
My
than
problem
like
is
two
I'm
or
in.
three.
I'm so many different places right now. I have like I have 4 different versions of this game in my head.
Well, so you're saying like where's healing coming from, right? So like you've got the ISAT tank, right, or your back to tank or whatever you want to call
Yeah.
it, right? So if you're a crew that works together, like we are, and everybody not play the same way, but if you're a group doing a thing together, you're essentially pooling resources, right? So like the one run we came back and we wound up having 4, so we each took one, we kicked one into the kitty. So if somebody needs to pull something or whatever, right? So your healing could be like, hey, well, we'll throw our rep in so you can get some time in the tank, and you know you'll pick us up next time, right? Like if you're a group that works together, that sort of you know. Not camaraderie, but like you know, that sort of like breakdown of like, hey, this is how we're going to approach this. Makes sense, right? Because like, why would you want to run with a guy that's like, well, fuck you, I'm not giving you one rep. Like, go out like that. It's your fault. You got hit in the head, right? Like, you're an asshole. You know? Yeah. Like we're playing a game together, you know, to tell a story together. So you would assume that most people are gonna approach it in that way. And maybe it's interesting to have one player that you know is maybe kind of on the edge of that, like, well, I got stuck in this group because my other group crashed out, and like I don't know you or whatever, right? Like but that's more of a you know meta game kind of like, you know, hey, I'm not being an asshole, but like this guy's kind of on the edge, sort of like you work all that stuff out before the game starts, right? So like everybody knows already. And you know that may lead to its own interesting situations, but I think for the most part, like people are going to be like, all right, well, we're working together, boom, we or you could go into debt, right? Like you could buy your own time in the tank, or you could go out hurt, or you know, like we cancel if somebody can't play, right? As a podcast, just as general, like this is how we hang out all the time. But you know, if you're playing a regular game and somebody can't make it, well, then maybe they stay back and they're licking their wounds while the other 2 people go out and do like the GM plans for a shorter, or the proxy plans for a shorter, like, hey, they're going to be back next week.
Yeah.
You know, we're just going to send you on this little thing just so we can play tonight, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
What if, because so I was just looking through the rules real quick. So yeah, I have healing as you heal 1 harm every day naturally, right?
Seems like a lot.
Only during recovery time. Like, so it's not like if you're out on a run or you're like actively doing stuff, right? This is like chilling out, right? It's not necessarily like it's basically anytime there's not exciting stuff happening, right? You gain 1. If you are actually investing resources or money into it, then you gain 2 per day.
I'd stretch that out more like
the
core thing.
Well,
like
what if? Yeah. What if instead we say, you know, so you need downtime in order to recover, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
And downtime has to be at least a handful of days of like not running, right?
Yeah.
And then what if, like, okay, so we're cool. We're going into downtime. We decide as a group, like, hey, okay, are you guys, like, are we done? Are we moving into downtime? You say, yeah. And then at the end of, like, in that process, everyone makes like a health roll, right? Against, whatever the standard, whatever the standard is, or maybe it's like modified by how much damage you've taken. I don't know necessarily how it would work, but like you make a roll, and like if you're 1 above, then you regain one damage. If you're 2 above, you regain 2. If you're 3 above, you regain 3. And you can use like skills or equipment and stuff like that to modify that roll. But it takes it out of like having to like eat up your actions, right? Like it's not like, hey, like, all right, I guess I'm gonna recover this downtime and I can't do anything else.
Make it,
but it also doesn't
delineated where if you can heal if you're not running, right? You may be at the bar, you may be, so it is that very black and white. If you're not running, you can heal. Now you may be getting into, a scuffle or training or whatever, but as long as you're not running, you can heal, kind of thing.
Right. And I mean, maybe we decide it's like, okay, in your downtime, you did get into a bar fight, or like you did decide to do martial arts training, right? You decided to do this. So instead of rolling at a 5 normally to regain health, well, now you're rolling at a 6 because it's going to, so maybe you might not regain as much damage as you would normally. Because of the actions you decided to do during your downtime. So you still get to do all the things you want to do, right? You still get to schmooze. You still get to work on your suit. You still get to train. You still get to do all this stuff. In addition to also recovering in the downtime.
Yeah. And I guess it depends on what is downtime a set amount of time? Like for core, it's generally about a month. But like, at the end of the season, when we run home and everything's all fucked up, I mean, in theory, we could, which I don't think we are, but like we could turn around and just run away again. But like the suits are out of power, right? Like it would be difficult to turn around and do it right away. Like you could do it within 24 hours, right? Or like 12 hours, like the suit's got to recharge. You're like, hey, you guys are back up again. The other team didn't come back. We got an urgent call. There's blah blah. Like you guys got to go, right?
Yep.
You're fucking air cav in Vietnam. Like get your fucking ass out and go do some shit.
Which like after your first run, right? So you did your first run, you came back, and then we did some downtime. Right. So if we're bringing it into the future, right? We're taking the first few runs, bringing them into the future. You would have done your run. You would have come back, done some downtime, done your second run to Dzane, come back. But you, at that point, that's when kind of shit went sideways, right? So there really wasn't time for so like that. Even though you were home and not necessarily doing anything, like you weren't running, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't a significant amount of time to actually be downtime.
Right.
So like first run back, like after your first run, downtime. After your second run, no downtime because there wasn't enough time for it. So I think we'd have to put in the rules, like, downtime has to be a significant enough amount of time where you are not running. You're not doing anything like life danger, like where you're putting your life in danger. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it's got to be at least a week, right? Like downtime would have, like not like, oh, we got a couple of days. Like I got a weekend, right? Went back to work today.
No. It would have to be like I don't know if because I'm also not big into like as you can probably tell from like power and blocks and speed and stuff like that. Like, I'm not big on like putting exact numbers on it, but I would probably say like it has to be several days, right? It has to be a significant amount of time.
And I think putting that, so saying, to heal, you have to not be running, right?
Yeah.
So you could be doing other stuff, but you can't go on a run, So my thought is it's called runners, right? You're supposed to be running. So
Right,
putting that at the core of you can go fuck around and do other stuff, but you can't run. Not within, like I said, within a range of whatever, but your downtime is you're not running because you're a runner and this is runners.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of feeds into that.
Right, yeah.
From a narrative sense or a gameplay sense, it isn't that like in D&D, okay, you have to sleep 8 hours. Well, someone woke you up at 7 hours and 30 minutes so you don't get your spells back because it's not 8 hours. Right,
right, yeah.
It's as long as you're not running and you're not getting into too much shit, then you're healing. If you're
right, yeah.
If Zachi's going to train, if he's doing non-contact training, then he can heal. If he's going to go get his ass kicked again, then he probably is not going to, it's that, but it should be that, you're a runner. If you're not running, you can heal kind of thing. And that makes sense because it feeds into what the setting is and what the, the rules are and what it is. You're a runner. So.
All right. Yeah. And it also, I think it does one of two, and also, with a timing standpoint, right? So if we say, hey, it has to be several days, and maybe, like I said, I don't know exactly what downtime will look like right now, but maybe there is an event, like there is something where like the organization comes to you or someone comes to you and it's like, hey, I need you guys to go out now for something. And you guys are like, maybe it's like something like, hey, there's another runner in danger, or maybe like you're like someone like Miss Joanna comes up to you and was like, we need this medicine or else this person is going to die. Like, you're not going to say no to Miss Joanna, even though you've only been back for 3 days. Right.
Right. Or 24 hours even.
Or, well, yeah. Well, but I'm saying like, so like if we say downtime is several days, right? Like a week or more, and it's been like 3 or 4 days, right? Well, I might still have you guys do a recovery roll. It's just say if the DL is normally 4, right? Because like in this instance, we do want somebody who doesn't, maybe you don't have any points in a skill that will give you a bonus to this, but we still want you to be able to recover hit points, right?
Right.
So say the DL is normally 4, but because you're recovering on a shortened timeline, now it's a 6. So you still have a chance of recovering like maybe a hit point if a friend helps you out.
Yeah.
but like, you're like, so you still have a chance, but your chances are a lot. You're not going to recover as many as you normally would. And your chance of recovering at all is slim to none.
Is lower. Yeah. And like, just as far as our narrative goes, it's a little bit different because, Miss Joanna works at the hospital. So any one of us can, in theory, go to the hospital and get treated when we come back. And it eliminates all of this. But that's our story, right? Like, that's not going to be everybody that plays.
That just gives you a bonus is all, right?
Yeah.
That just like, whether it lowers the DL, like it'll probably move the target number, honestly. Like if you're getting help, like it's easier to recover more more damage, or like, if you're using technology, like if you actually like going to the hospital, right? There is a doctor and nurses helping you get better using technology. So instead of your DL being 4, now it's going to be a 2, right? Because there's a lot more factors at play to making you better.
Yeah.
So,
and that's just our position.
How mad Miss Joanna is at Smokey, then that's
lap therapy.
Yeah. Which makes you just at that point, like, the contacts that you have are that much more important, right?
Yeah. But you have to take that like that has to come out of the equation, like in designing the system, because that's just part of our narrative. That's not like
Yeah.
Oh
that's
no,
not
yeah.
going to be the common, you know.
No, absolutely not. But
But
if
it could
you
be
do happen, yeah, if you do happen to make a connection of a doctor, like that's something you want to hold on to because that's going to be super important.
And you can put rules for that, you know, in there, right? So
Right,
like
yeah.
if you have access to a medical facility or a doctor or whatever, you know,
Mhm.
bumps the roll this way or that way or whatever. If you
I mean, it
don't,
could
then it's the
also
standard. It's
yep, that could be an upgrade to your garage. Like like you could put like medical equipment in your garage to make you heal quicker when you get home.
if it's like
So
the
I
aliens
think,
thing, right? You just kind of slide in and have it take the
Right.
whatever out of you
Yep.
while you're
and I
Yep.
think you mentioned this before earlier when you're talking about blades, right? So if you're going to incorporate this, base clubhouse, man cave, or whatever into this, to me that kind of makes
Runners
sense.
Clubhouse.
That makes sense, right? So we're in this post, whatever, right? It's free real estate. So my assumption would
Yeah.
be that Smokey would have it's probably a bar, right? It's probably his own personal bar. Zachi would have a training room, right? And it's okay, we're in this blasted out hellscape, but there's an extra building. It used to be,
Right. Yeah.
a McDonald's. So that kind of fits in with that. If you wanted to make that a part of it, that makes sense, right? Smokey has his man cave, Zachi has his training, gym. Huxley has a labby kind of whatever library.
Yeah.
To me that makes sense, and then you can build that into maybe that helps with the downtime if you're spending
Right. Yeah.
time depending what you're doing, right? I think that does, because it's a free for all, right? It's little pockets of civilization spread out. So chances are there's going to be a whole bunch of empty buildings. You can do whatever the hell you want with it, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing. You're like, if the reason I like the aspect of like the garage, the haven, like your little home, is you can also make it into whatever you want, right?
Yeah.
Like, for like, look at the three of you. Like, there would be medical equipment so that Hux can help fix you guys up when you get back. But there would also be like a workstation so that you could work on the suits, and Zuchi would have his little like training facility, like training area with like a dummy and some weights and stuff like that, and Smokey would have his little corner bar and and like all that kind of stuff. So you could have all this going on that would then help you in all the stuff that you guys want to focus on when you're back home.
Yeah.
so like in Blades, then would the default be like you have a garage at like, level 0 sort of thing? So like you have a
Yeah.
space, and then so then I wonder, like, mechanically, right? So like if you have access to goods, right? Like Smokey could build a bar in theory, right? Like you
Right,
could
yeah.
cut wood and fucking hammer nails and whatever. So like, is it like an XP spend to upgrade? Is it a rep spend to upgrade? Obviously, this is all like super early. Like I'm throwing things out that
Right,
then
yeah.
occurred to me, like,
Yeah.
because like an auto dock would be like a shit ton of XP or rep or whatever, right? Like it's just
Right, yeah.
easier to go to the doctor than it's the
Right, yeah.
long-term goal, right? Sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, getting a heavy bag and hanging it up feels like a 0 spend, right? Like you could
Right,
just
yeah.
put sand in a pillowcase and hang it,
Right.
right, to start.
Yeah. I think, yeah. So like to start, you could probably, oh man, do I want to make this like all right. So here's the idea, right? Like you can do anything you want. Like you could, like you said, like Zuchi could hang up a bunch of like some sandbags and like just like lift bricks and shit like that if he wanted to work out, right?
Yeah.
Like all Smokey needs is alcohol. Like you don't necessarily need a bar, right? You don't need like a big thing. Like, and like, as long as you have some tools, you don't necessarily need like, as long as you have a toolbox, you don't necessarily need like a workstation, right?
Right.
So like in theory, you could do all this stuff, like no problem. It's not going to give you a bonus to anything, but you can do it.
Yeah.
But maybe stealing. So Blades stole clocks from Apocalypse World. I don't necessarily want to steal clocks, right? But maybe during downtime, if you want, you can give some of your time to improving your garage, right? And over time, depending on what level it's at, it takes a certain amount of time. And like, so like if you do actually want to, if Hux does actually want to like make the area better, like, or easier for him to fix the equipment, well, he's going to have to spend some time and probably maybe some rep, right? Like investing himself in improving that area so that once you've done that, next time you go to fix some stuff, well, now you're doing it at a +1 because you now have this area that assists you in doing that because it's a more workable environment.
You hang some good lighting, you get some tool racks, you get
right,
some
exactly,
pegboards up on there so you get access to all the tools.
Hang chains from the ceiling so that it actually supports the weight of the suit when it makes it easier to swap equipment. Like
so we need level 3 scrap to boost up our garage to
yeah, basically. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I like how that happens. I'm not necessarily sure. Whether or not it requires rolls or you just say, hey, like I want to improve. I want to spend my downtime. Maybe that's how we do it, right? Maybe you're like, hey, I want to spend my downtime doing this. And all right. Again, like this is all just off the hip. But so say, because, maybe if you don't want to limit yourself, right? Maybe you're like, oh, but I also want to like do this other thing, right? I also want to work at the hospital on my, so that I can train up my healing skill, right? So maybe like similar to the recovery role, right? If you're just dedicating to yourself to doing one thing during downtime, then it's just going to be a standard role. Or maybe you even just do it, right? Like, okay, you only want to do one thing. Cool. You do that one thing, it's done. But if you're like, oh, but I want to do this thing and this thing, well, now it's going to need a role. And if you're like, oh, I want to do this thing and this thing and this thing, well, now it's going to be a role at a penalty because now you're divesting your time into a bunch of different areas.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it depends on what the downtime ultimately winds up. If it's like about a week, I mean, I could see you spending a day doing stuff in the garage, and then, maybe spending a couple afternoons at the hospital, and then, your days are out, schmoozing or walking around and reading a book. Right? You got like 12-ish plus hours to like do a bunch of different stuff during the day, right? Like it's.
Right, yeah.
Over 7 days, there's a lot of things you can do.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So that's why you can still do all the things. It's just how
efficient.
Effective in the end are all those things going to be, right?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
And then it's up to the player, like, how many things you actually want to do.
Right. Well, what counts as something to do, though, too, right? Like, again, if you're if you're hanging out at the bar talking to other runners, you know, trying to gather intel about places they've been, stuff that they've
Yeah.
seen, you know, creatures or whatever, like that feels like a zero spend, like you're just bullshitting. You know, like you're
Well,
I
it
know
all,
it's
like I
at a
said, it all
level
depends.
above that because it's like a
Yeah.
specific, like I'm gathering intel, but it's also just talking to somebody.
Well, I feel like gathering intel is more than just talking to people, right? Like you actually have to invest resources into like see there's more for me at least, like intel isn't just like rumor mongering,
Hmm.
right? It's not just like catching some rumors here and there. It's like actual usable like I I definitely know this is something I'm going to be able to use. Um
Yeah, I mean, I guess, right? Like, hey, how did the
yeah.
last run go? Where did you guys head to? What did you see? Oh, we haven't been up there
Yeah.
yet, blah, blah, blah. Now I know something about the area I haven't been at
Right, yeah.
in a minute and a half, right? Like,
Right, yeah.
that's intel.
Yeah, right, yeah. I mean, yeah. But it depends on, and I mean, who knows? Maybe like we do some rolls and it actually works out that, yeah, fuck, it worked. Yeah. Like you
Yeah,
just got an extra little bit.
yeah,
So, but yeah, I think with this, and again, we'll play it out. Um, you know, it allows you to do as little or as much as you want to do in your downtime
yeah.
without restricting you to like, well, I got it. I'm really hurt, so I have to just heal.
Hmm.
If you want to do that, you can, or you can do, you can do one other thing and you're still gonna heal.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. That's fair. What say you, Kevin?
I think we're trying to eliminate, because that's the frustrating thing. If the roles are telling you you have to do something now, that stops you from, you feel like you're at a standstill from actually playing. So I think what we're
right,
saying
yeah,
kind of fits in. I think it fits in with the setting and, what it's supposed to be. Eh, all the people that are still alive have been through shit, right? So they're not going to stop doing stuff because of, they don't feel good or whatever, right? So having that feed into, okay, to heal, you just can't be doing what the big major thing. It's not going to stop you from doing other things. And I think
just don't put your life at risk for a week. That's all
exactly,
we're
yeah. Don't,
asking.
yeah. You're a runner. Don't run. Like I said,
Yeah,
Yep.
within the boundaries of, they said if for the example of us, if Zachi's going to train, then he can heal. If he's going to go get his ass kicked, then he's not going to heal, kind of thing. But that kind of fits in, and we have to put it into the setting of where we are and what we're playing.
Yeah.
If Huxley got a concussion, right? Okay, well, he can still run and shoot stuff, so keep doing that kind of thing. So, it's not our world where you get a concussion and you have to go get a million tests and not do anything and sit in a dark room. It's you're lucky to be 20 years old, you made it this far. So
Yeah.
I think
yeah,
I think that and I think what this is trying to solve is that not knowing what to do, that the roles are telling us we can't do something. We've only been playing for a half an hour. Now what the hell are we going to do, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that fits in and takes care of that problem. Um,
Hmm.
of yeah, as I said, for like the D&D thing, okay, to get your spells back you have to sleep 8 hours. Random encounter gets you at 7.5. Now you don't get any of those spells back. It is that all or nothing kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we're in a world where there's always shit happening, or always stuff going on, and it's all dangerous. So you have to make allowances of, you know, most people, most people who've made it this far have, seen some shit and been through some shit. So they should be able
Yeah.
to, come back. They should be able to recover while doing other things. You know, they're not going to eat up. They're not. Miss Joanna doesn't have them on bed rest or anything like that.
Right.
Now, are you thinking to keep the stats, essentially the same, and then keep tags as opposed to skills, so that still is the same scenario?
Yeah, I think I'm still going to keep. So, and this kind of ties into like the new creation and advancement. So I'm, and I've I don't know if anyone else has. I don't even know if anyone else has access to the new rules yet or not. To the version 11. I can't remember if I dropped those or not.
Yeah, you sent them out. Yeah.
I think you're gonna have to reshare.
Well, so like
that's the one we're gonna go to.
Right. Yeah. So I renamed the 6 abilities to be more in line with the runner's universe, right? So like, where did I put them? Blah blah blah. So I got rid of like Psyche because that doesn't make sense in the runner's universe, right? It made sense in Day Trippers because it was like that psychological, it was supposed to be that kind of dealing with weird shit, right?
Yeah.
So it was more of a psychology thing than anything else. So now I have agility, brains, focus, health, might, and presence. Which I also didn't like charm, right? Because charm is more, it's positive, right? Like I'm charming, I have charm. Well, charm for like that aspect, like, is also intimidation, right? So charm, intimidation is antithetical to me. So so that's why I turned that into presence, because it's your presence, whether it's positive or negative, right? So I just changed up those. So yeah, I've changed up the abilities, changed up the stats. I still like the training. I think at least in this version, I've renamed it expertise. I don't know if that's how it was before. I might change that. I don't know. I do. So in talking with you, John, about Huxley, how you wanted to like do some, and you're like, oh, well, I want to make him like, and I think one of the tags you might have added was like fit. And you're like, oh, I guess that makes sense. Right. I want to make it more. And I think that's why I went with expertise. And I might I want to make it more grounded, right? I want it to be something you actually like worked for, either actively or naturally, right? Which is also why I'm tying. So I do want those to be not, I think initially I went very broad, right? And I want to scope those down more. I still want to give you freedom in them to have them be relevant in multiple situations. But I do want to kind of focus those down just a little bit more into so they're not viable in every situation, right? I still want there to be moments where you're like, okay, well, I do not have an expertise that fits this. Right? Rather than like, how can I pick one of these 3? And it's like, no matter what, one of your 3 skills is going to fit a situation. So that's why I do want to narrow those down. Not a ton, just a little bit.
So does that mean we want to respec Scout then? Because that has a number of different functions.
No, but I think we might limit its capability. Ultimately it's up to it's like GM fiat kind of thing, right? Like if we feel like it fits, then it should fit, but the GM should feel comfortable saying no,
Yeah.
So I might have to like put that in the rules too, of like, it's like, hey, if this makes sense, let it make sense. But if it doesn't, feel free to say it doesn't.
Right.
So, but yeah. And then also there's, you know, drivers becoming more substantial in the system. So yeah, and then I do want to also have the effects and the build tags from the suits be more. So I do want to put tags are still definitely going to be a thing, and they're going to be, you know, more of a focus, I hope. They're going to be like the thing that everything's kind of built up off of. So
gotcha. Are we going to need to respec characters before we play again?
Absolutely. Yeah. Just like, you know, just like we did with going from season 1 to season 2, where we dropped skills, went into tags, did that whole thing, and it just made sense to just wipe the slate clean and start fresh. It's the same thing with this. But I will say more so because it's just going to, not that anything is necessarily going to change in the character, right? Like ultimately you guys might just end up with the same exact numbers on your character sheet that you have right now. But what it's going to do is introduce you to the new creation and the new advancement. So it's going to get you familiar and hopefully comfortable with the system at character creation, instead of being like, okay, we're just going to play with the numbers we have now, but all these things have changed going forward. So it's going to give us a chance to actually like give me a chance to explain to you how everything works now, and actually get you to handle with them first before we start to actually play.
Okay, that's fair. I assume so.
Yeah. And like in just as before, you know, while it is possible that you end up with the same characters, if you feel like things just aren't working out the same, and you maybe want to drop a skill or add a skill or increase a skill, you know, as long as the numbers dictate that you can, like, then we're going to do that. We're going to play them as if they were new characters, and raise them up to where they are now. Yeah, that's about it. So,
okay. Makes sense.
But yeah, well, so it's going to be interesting.
Wait till we tell Kurt.
I'm going to get another angry emoji from him. I can guarantee it. So, and yeah, I mean, I'm also simplifying. So like I said, we're going to standardize. I'm probably going to standardize specializations into it. So one of the things I was going to do with blades, and I don't know. So it fixed the problem for me, we'll say. And I don't necessarily know, going back to this new system, it brings up that problem again, and I don't know if I want to fix it or how to fix it. But anyway, so in Blades, when you do character creation, you get 4 points, or you get 7 points, right? 3 of those come from your playbook. 4 of them come from your background, right? The way I was going to treat it is your playbook was your specialization, right? And your specialization was your suit, right? So you know how there were in the new Runners 11 version, there were different chassis that you could get that gave you different bonuses and stuff. Instead of being able to buy a new chassis, right, to upgrade and do all that kind of stuff, instead, the specialization that you went with was the chassis that you have, right? And then you got to improve and upgrade that chassis through the different abilities that you could get and stuff like that. And so the problem that I'm running into that I have never been able to solve is if I get hit, what takes damage, right? Like if I get punched, am I taking the damage or is my suit taking the damage? Does it make sense for my suit? Does it make sense for me to take the damage when my suit's the thing that got hit?
I guess it depends, right? Like, if you, like a knight in armor gets hit by a mace, both of those things are taking damage. Right?
They do,
like,
but the person is not taking nearly as much damage as they would if they weren't wearing the suit of armor.
It still break your arms and everything else, right? Like it
will, yeah. But it won't if I'm wearing a helmet and I get hit in the head with a mace. Like, I still have a really good chance of, like, I'll probably be concussed, right? I might end up with a head wound. I'll probably end up with a head wound, but I have a better chance of not dying immediately because my helmet took the brunt. It took a lot of damage.
If you want to make, so we haven't really got into this suits that much when we've played. I think we've upgraded them, kind of thing. I think the differentiator for this setting is, right, the suits are what are keeping you safe out on a run.
Right, yeah.
Right. So if you want to bring the suits front and center, maybe have it as if you're actually on a mission, if you're on a run, the damage, any damage you take is suit damage, right? Because that's the most important thing. If you're out on a run, you don't have a suit, you're screwed, right? So maybe have it is if you're on a run, the suit takes a damage. Or if Smokey's in the bar and he pisses someone off and gets into a fight, then he takes the damage. You know what I mean? If you want to have the suit central to what this is, then have that be the focus of, the focal point for taking damage is the suit itself. And then if you're on a run and your suit's done, if your suit's lost all of its, it took all the damage it can take, then the person starts taking the damage. But I guess that's a decision if you want to make that, on in my mind it would be if you're on a run, then the suit takes the damage. If you're not on a run and you're just screwing around, then you take the damage.
So I have thought about before. That was one of the where I come up with maybe it's kind of like it's more of like maybe a meta way of thinking, but like when it comes down to recovery, basically, right? Like if I'm going to heal damage, well, if my suit's the thing that's taken the damage and I go to recover, it's not me recovering, but it's the suit recovering. So is that me fixing the suit? And then at that point, too, the player also then has to technically keep track of stats for both the suit and them. Because you have to keep track of the stats, that the damage that the suit's taken, but also the damage you've taken outside of the suit. And where do you delineate those two things, right? Like, if I say I have 3 agility, well, me and the suit, does the suit also have 3 agility, or does it have different stats than I do? So I've messed around with some of that, and I couldn't necessarily come up with a good way to do it. Yes.
So could it, to like oversimplify, maybe it's just the armor right? So like if you have one armor, this occurs to me because it's a salvage union game, right? Because it had the armor plating, absorbed all the damage, sloughed off. You've got to replace it.
Yeah, that's a good
So
point.
maybe if your suit has armor, if you got an armor 1,
Yeah.
you can take 1 hit. After that, the runner takes the damage. If you have 3 armor, the armor can take 3 hits, and then the runner takes the damage. And it's not that the suit is disabled, although you could get super crunchy and like have fucking tables for like what part got hit and does it disable a leg and
You
blah
could.
blah blah. If you wanted to, you could do that. Or it's just the armor absorbs 3, right? Because maybe it's spread. Like maybe 1 goes in the chest, 1 goes in the leg, 1 goes in the arm. Whatever. It breaks that armor, right? Like it's you're just like armor, right? Like heavy air quotes. Yeah. And then after that, like it's not that the suit doesn't have integrity. It's not like you're necessarily exposed to the signal, but it's not doing what you intended it to do because parts are falling off or whatever. Yeah. And it might be like, oh, I can just bolt a new plate on when I have time. And then maybe that gives, bumps my armor back up to +1 till we can get home because we found some level 1 scrap, right? And we can fucking like put some fucking plasteel on it, and like it just covers up the hole in the chest. But it's only good for 1 more shot, and then the runner just takes the damage. It simplifies all of the. Like, well, what about this and agility and whatever? And it's like, nope, if you've got armor, you're good for however good your armor is.
That's so in Blades, they do have armor, right? But it's, as Blades does, it's like metaphysical armor. Like they say you can make it whatever you want, but so every character gets 2 armor slots, right? Yeah. Which means at any point in the game, you can choose to not take damage, to not take a harm by checking off an armor slot. Mm-hmm. There are some playbooks that will give you a 3rd special armor, which means that character can negate 3 harm in a session, right? So yeah, I actually think that, but I kind of like your idea of like, it's not something in that you choose whether or not you want to use it. Right. I kind of like in this instance, it's not necessarily something you choose to do or not. Right. You like, if your character has, however you've built your suit, right? Like, so maybe you have 4 armor, right? So that means you're good for negating 4 damage. Mm-hmm. You don't get to choose when you use it. Like that just ticks down. And once that's gone, that's gone.
Yeah. Completely gone. So if you get into a bad fight at the beginning of your run, you've got all the rest of your run and the run back.
Right, exactly. And the way back.
Armor.
Right?
Yeah. Again, unless you can find some scrap or you get to wherever your run's going, you're like, hey man, fuck, I took this damage. You guys have any, you guys have any plascrete? You guys have any, right? And now like maybe you got to go into debt. Maybe you owe a favor. Maybe,
right? Yeah.
It's going to take you amount of time. You got to find space. Or are they going to give that to you? Like it leads into story elements, which, maybe sort of a hand wavy kind of thing, but like it's still a conversation in game where I have to devote time and energy and resource to at least getting 1 armor back on this thing or whatever, and core characters are hard to kill. And in the new system, I guess we'll see if that equates to a similar thing, right? Like, everything does a damage. So it's like hard to kill somebody. So like 4 armor, like, well, that's rough, but like we've played 20 sessions and I think we all have like +1 armor. Right.
Right.
So it's a shot, right? Because it costs rep or money or whatever it is, right? Like, and every time you go out, if you've got to replace that, like, do you wait and then try to get better armor, or are you just going to spend a rep every time you come back to replace a plate, or, put in some plasticrete or whatever it is, right? Like, again, it's costing you a resource while you're doing your thing, So you're like, well,
And
I don't want to take that job
yeah.
because it's only going to pay us 3. So it's only going to get me an armor back, and it's not going to do anything towards my garage. It's not going to pay for my hospital bill. It's not going to pay, you know what I mean?
Right,
Like,
yeah.
and I guess you have money, right? Like, rep and money are two separate scale kind of things, right? So like, I guess going to the doctor would be like a money thing and not a rep thing, but still, right? Like, things cost stuff.
Well, I mean, so that's one of the, and that's also, I mean, we really haven't dealt with it too much. But in shrinking down the scale of the world too, like, I think before, we've talked about this too. Like, when I first created it, we were talking about like metropolises, like giant cities with tens of thousands of people in them. And now, like, if you're lucky, like, now we're talking more like Walking Dead size places, right? Like, where most of the knolls you go to are going to have like a dozen, maybe 2 dozen people. and like, if you're really lucky, you'll find a place that has like 50 people, and they've been doing really well, and they've taken over a couple of blocks of a former town. Like, so, but like, most of it's going to be like a really small neighborhood.
I could see it being bigger, a couple of hundred, maybe. Like, I think even that makes sense, right? Like, to make a collective work, right? Like, you need a minimum number of people, right?
That's a really good point. Yeah. But to the point of it, it's almost going against games like Red Market, right? Where like Red Market is like a comment on capitalism by giving you hyper capitalism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I kind of want to make this like even though like shit's really bad and there's still bad people out there and there's nothing's going your way, you're just surviving, right? But I kind of also want to do like the people are inherently good. Mm-hmm. Right? And I don't want it to be like, okay, well, there's like 50. Great, we have 50 people in this town, but you still owe me $15.
Yeah.
Like, no, fuck that. Like, there's 50 people here. There's no money. Like, that's not a thing. Like,
the barter thing, yeah. Well, I mean, it could be the size of the town, right? Like, proximity to the signal, or like, the towers or whatever, right? Like, because it could be, because in the original, right, you just roll for your null, right? So there could be nulls that are like ultra capitalist or libertarian or whatever.
Oh, right, yeah, exactly.
Like, everybody's like, whatever. So you could leave that open, right? Just to have that, like,
and I mean, that's still, I mean, that's true. That's still going to be in there, where there could be like an ultra religious null, where it's like, okay, cool, you can have whatever you want, but you also have to work for me. Like, so like, you're basically indentured servants. Like,
and maybe in a place like that, you're running, like, if that's the place you choose, you're running to get the fuck out. Like, I don't want that. Like, this is terrible. And you're trying to find a way to like get enough rep to get the fuck out and find some other place to go, right? Or whatever. Like, it could be an interesting story.
Yeah. And the organization doesn't care either. Like, they have a waypoint in that null, but it's only because you guys have resources. Like, that's the only thing they care about. Yeah, exactly.
And paper and shit.
Yep. So but I kind of like the idea. I kind of like the armor thing. That could work.
It super simplifies everything. Number of hits that you can take, and again, core specifically is meant to be cinematic, right? It's Rocky, it's John Wick. you get punched in the head for 40 minutes and then you're like, Adrian, but you're fine, right? Like you win
Yeah.
and you do the thing. So like it's
Yeah.
meant to be that. You get shot, you know, you're John McClane with glass in your feet, you know, climbing
yeah.
through ducks. Like it's intended to be that kind of a storytelling
Oh yeah.
mechanic, right? But if it becomes ridiculous, we're like, you know, you get the 3 armor, and you know the other, you know, the opposition on a run doesn't roll well, and you just don't get hit, or you know the armor absorbs it and you don't take any damage or whatever. But you can always up that, you know. And again, it's
Right.
like,
Yeah.
you know, what's the scale?
that's
Like,
why-
how much of a dick
yeah.
do you want to be, right? Like,
Right. That's why
I'm
I
not
want to
challenging
push
your
yeah.
resources.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what with the one-sided rolling too, right? And I'm not, and that's the thing, I'm going to make this more Blades and Apocalypse world than I'm in Salvage Union, right? So like in Salvage Union, the players are rolling and the GM is rolling, right? You're all working off the same scale, but everyone's rolling.
Yeah.
With this, only the players are going to be rolling. So if you get a no, well, that's damage right there. Like you are going to take damage when you fail. If that's what the outcome is, right? Like if you're fighting somebody. So in Blades, your role dictates the overall narrative for that action, right? So it doesn't break it down into like a few seconds, like a few moments. Think of it more like a page of a comic rather than a single frame of a comic. So like your role is dictating the outcome of everybody involved in your moment. So it's not just you throwing, if you got into a fist fight with somebody, your role isn't just you punching them, but it's them punching you.
Interesting.
So
yeah, I thought. Go ahead.
No, so if you roll and you roll a yes, but, right? Well, that yes, but could very well be you doing a harm, but also taking a harm because you both threw a good amount of punches and kicks at each other. And so you landed some and they landed some. So you both took damage.
See, I thought the simplification in the combat mechanic was so that when the GM rolled, it was easier because it was like, oh, I only have to roll against X number that I know what the number is. So it eliminates all of the, because
it just straight up eliminates the GM entirely. Okay. So the only thing that's happening is the players are rolling and the GM is comparing that single roll to a number and dictating the outcomes from all that.
So if so, I would suggest then if we go with this armor mechanic, right, for absorbing hits, so that armor isn't added to the roll then, because it doesn't make it harder to hit you, right? Like if I put a chest carrier on, it's not harder to hit me in the chest. It's just going to absorb the damage, right? Absolutely, so armor doesn't give a bonus then. It just negates a hit flat out.
Absolutely.
But it's still like, if it's a 4 to hit me, it's a 4 to hit me with this here or not here, right? Like it doesn't.
Right. Yep. Yeah. What I might do, depending. So with this too, enemies don't need stats, right? Doesn't make sense because they're not rolling.
But if they have armor, wouldn't you need that, right? Because then it would negate a hit in the same way, right? Like in a suit, specifically in a suit, I guess.
Oh, yeah. So what would probably happen, what I'm thinking is, so, and it does break, it breaks, this is where it like super breaks from core, right? Because in core, everyone was treated the same, right? Like you, in theory, you create an enemy the same way you create a character. They have the same stats. They are handled exactly the same. In this, I'm thinking of just like you're breaking an enemy down into like a few numbers. So like they'll probably have like a certain amount of health. They'll have some armor. They might have some abilities that like dictates how they act and what gets modified. So like maybe they do have like, if they have martial arts training or something like that, then maybe like a straight up fight with them is a little bit more difficult. So they'll have modifiers to the DL. But they don't need stats. Like they don't need to be a full character.
I guess that you'll have to see them play, I guess.
Yeah.
It's not where I thought you were going, so it throws me a little bit.
Gotcha,
I just assume like, Mara's got her stats and armor and whatever, and then we're both rolling, right? Then we're like in Tread D&D rolling. We're both rolling and we're both trying to, hit.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, but then what are you trying to hit then, right? Because there's no AC. Like, what's the so having
the
a
DL.
like if
so it all starts off if I'm going with it goes straight up to what we were talking about before. If we have a 1 to 12 scale, right? I kind of like the 1 to 12. We'll see how it works. And your standard hit is a 6, right? So if you're going up just against a standard enemy, right? Just a regular person, no armor, no nothing, right? Then well, actually we might lower it down. We'll see.
It seems like 5. A lot, because at like level 1, you the best you could do is the yes but.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So let's say 5, right? And we might say like I might change where the scale is. We'll see. But we'll say 5 is your target number. Well, if you hit a 5, then you hit them, right? So you do 1 damage. If you roll a 6, then you do either 2 damage or you get damage in an effect, like whatever you want to do. But then maybe you're going up against like a user, right? Who is slower and easier to hit. So now instead of a 5, it's a 4. But maybe you're going up against another runner who's a little faster. So maybe they have like the fast tag, so they're harder to hit. So instead of being a 5, it's a 6. So that number is going to change depending on who you're going up against.
Okay, yeah, I don't dislike that. That sounds like that could work.
Yeah, and it could, and that mechanic will work the same for like environmental hazards, right? Like if you're going through a newly fallen building that has like stacked rubble that might still be unstable, and like there's there's still like a propane tank that has some propane in it, like then that's going to be fucking hard. Like that's going to be like 8s. Whereas like if it's something you've already done before, it's a 3. Like because there's a well-worn path here. You just have to kind of watch your step, make sure you don't slip and fall. But
right. Yeah, that makes sense. And then if you fail, then obviously you take a condition, you take a damage,
exactly, yeah.
Whatever it is, yeah.
And then it could also lead in, if you fail, right? Well, maybe like the effect that happens is that like it gets harder now. So instead of being a 4, now it's a 6. Because you fuck some shit up. Things have changed now. It's not how you thought it was going to be. So now it's a little more harder.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So, yeah, we'll see.
Interesting. We'll have to come up with some terminology for the expanded scale. Well, I guess just 2 more things, right. I guess.
Well, I guess you don't necessarily... I mean, it really depends on if we need... Maybe, I don't know, maybe we'll do like a band instead of like individual things. Maybe it'll be like 1 to 3 is this, 4 to 6 is this, 7 to 9 is this, 10 to 12 is this. So
it doesn't give you a lot of room to play around with, though, right? Like easy,
well, yeah, but
difficult, hard, insane, right? Like it doesn't
yeah,
give you a lot of wiggle room.
Yeah. So we'll see.
All right. Did we do it?
I think we did it.
We'll see in a couple weeks.
Yeah. Oh God.
Yeah.
Oh.
Gets her right and you're off tomorrow.
I got a lot to write now.
Well, like Kevin said, jot down a couple of things, right? Like so.
Yeah, exactly. This will probably be like a page of ideas.
Yeah,
like scribbled down notes.
Yeah, we've got character. I mean, unless we have to redo the characters, I guess you'd have to have. But that part's already
we're
written,
still gonna,
right?
yeah.
For like,
yeah, exactly. Character creation is already done.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. But like for like the combat thing with the armor and the just choosing the DL.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What was the other? There was something else. Combat was the big one.
Combat's the big one, yeah.
Pick the high level things that you want to make sure are like key, and then
right, yeah,
and then filter down just some ideas underneath those, and then we'll see how just focus on those things you want to be a main part of or a main focus, and then we can see where it goes from there.
Yeah,
and
I think what we'll probably do.
So...
What was that?
I said, where we're starting in the next session.
Right, yeah.
Maybe kind of where things are going to go. Yeah. So, like, you can sort of pre-plan a couple of things because kind of like this is maybe sort of how it's going to go.
Yeah. Well, I guess so. That brings something up though. So, in a couple of weeks, right? So our next get together. Do we want to actually spend that? How do we want to spend that time? Do we want to like spend half of it, or do we want to spend like the beginning of it, like redoing the characters and going over all that? And then do we want to get into the session? Or do we want to actually like take like the whole time? So here's the few things that I wanted that will change in character creation with the full version is that in character creation, you're going to create your character, you're going to create your squad, and you're going to create your garage.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But in the place you're in narratively, it doesn't make sense for you to create your garage right now, right?
Yeah.
Because we're starting the game in a very caustic area, right? We're starting session 3 in chaos, right?
Yeah.
So do we maybe we could do the full character creation, right? Of doing all 3 steps. Or we could do character creation at the start of that session and then go into the game, back into the game and start session 3. And then maybe like the next session, depending on where we are, either do the squad character creation or the garage. And then the session after that, do the one that we didn't do.
I mean,
in all honesty, the garage and the squad won't take all that long. It's a decision you have to make. It'll probably take us like 10, maybe 15 minutes.
How long do you think the character stuff is going to take? Right, like
don't really think that long, honestly. Nothing's changing. Like tags are still going to be the same, right? It's really just putting in all the points is going to be it. So I don't see it taking too long, honestly. And really it could in theory be something that if I give you guys the rules and the number of points that you have to spend, in theory, you could do it ahead of time.
Yeah. Yeah. I would
so
at
that
least
we don't have a 15-minute opening of the session of you guys literally just like counting out boxes.
yeah. I would at least like to attempt to do it on my own, and then we can,
Yeah.
we can obviously go over
from there.
stuff.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then we'll
'cause
see
that's the
how
thing,
intuitive it is to do it too, right? Like,
Sure, yeah.
like here's the book, do it,
Yeah.
and then we all fuck it up.
The system itself, similar to Blades, right? It's not like Core or D&D or anything like that, where you can be like, okay, here's like in D&D, you can be like, okay, start at 5th level, right? Or in Core, you can be like, okay, start at 300 XP. With this, it's a little more difficult. It's a system more suited to creating a character from start and then leveling them up.
Mhm.
I could, in theory, say, like, you guys have X amount of points to spend them however you want, right?
Right.
But to truly understand how the leveling system works, what I'm going to instead do is, I think you start off with 7 points. So like these are your points at character start. And then these are how many marks you would have gotten since we've been playing. Like, level your character up, basically.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it will, in full honesty, full transparency, it's going to be a much longer process than normal, only because it's not necessarily a system meant to start at higher level, right?
Right.
So yeah, I think I might do that then, and just give you guys, be like, hey, this is what you guys got to work with. Work it out. You got 2 weeks. And then we'll talk about the process.
If anything, yeah.
At the beginning.
Come up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Like over Discord, if you have any questions, or if any point anyone wants, if you guys are like, hey, this makes no fucking sense. Can we just real quick jump into a Discord chat to figure this out? Like, then we can do that. And then, so should we just plan next session? You guys come in with your quote unquote new characters, and we'll just talk about the process for like the first 10 or so minutes.
Yeah, we can do that.
All right, cool.
Agreed.
And then essentially, as far as narrative goes, like when we get around to doing the garage, are we just sort of going to retcon that that's a thing that's been there the whole time, or do we want to like, because
we'll start that. We'll start that off as something new.
Okay. Because I was going to say, we could work it into the narrative and be like, hey, Miss Joanna said we can use the garage in the house to like fucking put our shit or whatever. And like, you know, but I feel like we're not going to be there. The opportunity to do that, but who knows, right? Like, I don't know where anything's going.
Yeah.
So
So we'll treat that as, that's why I said it doesn't necessarily make sense narratively to do the garage, to do the workshop at next session, because we don't, you guys could be anywhere at the end of next session.
Right.
Really depends on how everything plays out. So we'll wait to do that until the narrative, there's like a downtime moment, basically. We'll figure out where you guys settle, and then that's when we'll do that mechanic. It makes sense at character creation because that's where you guys are starting off. But we're not in that situation right now. So
I assume we're gonna have to rebuild the suits then as well. And if we're losing the signal burn and shit like that, so like I assume there's still some sort of like plating level of protection, or are we going to remove that from the suit as well? If it's
think
not,
we're just going to I think we're just going to completely remove that.
so I think so. Like in the current iteration, I think it's shielding. So like that'll be points that we get back. So we'd have to redo. And if you want to choose a specialization as far as like, Fluxley's a ghost or whatever, if that comes with a certain level of stuff, and maybe that's not written at that point then, right? Because in the specializations and abilities and all that kind of shit. So I don't know if that really matters then at that point. Like if he just stays in the Medicus and we just retool it to remove like shielding and stuff.
Right. Yeah. I think what we might do. So we'll say this. It really depends on how far along I am in the rewrite. So I'll throw things out to you guys as soon as I have them done.
Okay.
So if I get specializations nailed down, actually, you know what we'll do? You guys, so as I get stuff done, I'll send it out, and that's when we'll implement it into the game. So we'll play for now with the suits that you guys have, right?
Okay.
And then once I retool all the suit specs, like all the equipment for them, maybe that's when we'll decide to do like, I'll say, okay, in the next few weeks, you guys rebuild your suits, and then similar to the character stuff, like we'll just real quick go over like, hey, these are the changes we made to the game. This is how the suits are changing. Why don't you guys go over how your suit changed? And then we'll do it that way. What I also probably throw out in terms of the specializations is if you guys want to look them, I think I have six specializations. If you guys want to look over those 6 and give me the one you're most interested in, I'll try to flesh those ones out first.
Okay.
So that you'll be able to go in with those if I'm able to get them done in time.
Sure. That makes sense.
That way I'm not like kind of scattershotting everything and I'm like, well, I got some of this, but it's nothing you guys can really use. So we won't implement it yet. So
is that going to look like a Blades ability thing? Like a Edge of the Empire where like there's abilities or talents tied to like a tree, or Salvage Union, like a tree of abilities that you can. Yeah.
So I'm definitely gonna. The way I have it now is definitely gonna be simplified. Because like, one of the so I'm also going to be one of the things I came out with runners for, and kind of with Salvage Union as well, is simplifying the power system. So like with before I had like pushes and surges and all this kind of like different ways you could use it. I'm probably just gonna kind of shove that down into one mechanic. And then the other things are going to be ways that you tweak DLs and play with the mechanics. But it's still going to be like you have. I don't know whether or not it'll be like a system in Salvage Union where you have to work your way down, or it'll be more of like a Blades thing where like as you go, you can choose what abilities to buy into. So, but yeah, either way, it'll be like your specialization gives you access to these things if you actually spend the time to unlock them, right?
And I think you brought this up earlier, as far as them either being suit specializations or character specializations. Is that up in the air sort of thing still?
I think I'm still gonna go more towards suit specializations.
Okay.
So because they will be, these are gonna pretty much just be things that you're using out in the field, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah. So all the abilities are going to be catered towards running and doing the job and surviving out in the gap. So this is going to be around tweaks to your suit and how your suit reacts and acts. Yeah, so it's going to be, it's going to be your suit basically. So,
and we've never dealt with this. It just occurs to me because of the crosstalk with Salvage Unit and stuff. Are you going to add something like range bands to combat to simplify? Right, like we obviously do everything in theater of the mind. So
right,
to think about placement and stuff. Obviously, nobody's going to use minis with this necessarily.
Right.
But to think in like, I'm close enough to be in melee, or short enough to use twin link 50 cals and get fucking slashed by a giant monster tentacle, right? Like it seems like that kind of thing matters to to a greater or lesser extent, right? Like in a very broad sort of way, because like with suit specializations, it makes me think of the Hussar or whatever the hell suit I was in. Like you can move an extra range band, right? So like maybe it's got the tag of like its ability is fast, and what it means is you can get there quicker. Like you can close a range band, right? Which would really only be useful in combat probably. But like, hey, if you're scouting or whatever, right? Like faster, lighter, stronger, like these like real broad general categories, and then like you could come up with an ability that sort of whatever.
Well, if you look at page 79 of the runner's version 11 rules, it actually does have mechanics for ranges.
Oh, okay. Yeah. See, I don't think I looked at that one because then you said you were going to change it, and I don't think I ever read it.
Yeah.
So I need you to share it with me again.
I break things out into close, short, medium, and long. So close is do whatever you want, right? Like take whatever kind of actions against that target that you want. Short is you can do like a quicker action, so it does require you to move some to it and then take an action. Medium is like it's going basically like 2 range bands, so you can move to get there. And then long is it's going to take you a while to get there. So,
so is all that stuff in the runner's folder?
I don't know.
Let
me check.
Because I see 12. But I think I think 12 was. Oh, I do see 11 because it's got the color cover on it. Okay, yeah, I do have it.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna download this then. Then I have no excuses. And the last edit was December 13th, 2024.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. I do have it.
Yeah, because then I started working on then that's when I decided that I was gonna change systems.
Shift.
Yeah, so yep. Hey, I was right a month and a half ago.
Nice. All right. Do we want to wrap it up here? Does that?
I think
you
so.
Feel good about it?
I feel a lot better now than I did 13 hours ago. So
sorry.
No, it wasn't you, honestly. It was more so this morning I decided, right? Like, based on like your final, you were kind of the final kick, right? But I had been mewing this over for a little while. But you were the final kick of like, okay, I am doing this. But I was like, but how? Right? Like I don't know what I'm going to do to differentiate this. And now after talking to the two of you, I have a lot of ideas of how to differentiate it now and how to make it its own system. So I feel a lot more comfortable now about this whole thing moving forward.
Nice. Good. Well, good. I'm glad.
Yeah. Now I just have to download this so I can listen to it 10 more times.
Shit. All right. Well, if you've made it this far, God bless you.
Hey, thanks. Right? Yeah. God damn.
We'll be playing on, in theory, Sunday, April, what is that, 16th? Is going to be our next game. So
April? Really? We're waiting 4 whole
April,
months?
February. Next month.
Yes,
on the 16th.
Yep.
We'll be jumping into a new season. We'll have some new mechanics. So tune in for that so you can see it in play. We've got our Patreon up if you want to throw a couple of bucks our way. Ratings and reviews on whatever your podcatcher of choice is, probably helpful. The Patreon's got like early releases, outtakes, post shows, all that extra stuff. So if you're down for that, so some of the post shows would be, not a full blown like 3 hours talking about mechanics like this, but just, breaking down the episodes. Sometimes it's just us bullshitting, talking about whatever. So that stuff is all on there if you want to check that out. We're on Blue Sky. We're still on Twitter. Because I get to call Elon a cunt every day, so I like to go in and tweet and do that. So I'm loath to get rid of that. But we're on all places. Instagram, although that may be going away soon too. Facebook, which I may also be canceling. But we're currently on most of the things. So if you want to check us out on those various platforms, thanks for checking it out. We appreciate you all watching, and we hope you're enjoying it. And we'll catch you next time.
Peace.